All right, cool. Well, let's just we'll start. Yeah, I guess we'll just introduce the movie.
Incest. What's your opinion, Griffin?
Maybe I've just been watching too much Game of Thrones.
Oh my fucking.
But
so there is a correct answer to that question.
It's not something I'd like to pursue. But Jaime Lannister, best character for sure.
You know, that's not where I thought you were going to take it, but oddly enough, I do agree with you. His character is that
really good character.
Pure and simple character assassination in like the fourth quarter. Like his entire arc was going somewhere, and then they just decided to rip everything away from him, and then he crawls back to his.
Yeah, but that show's not good, so therefore, like they assassinate every character on the way down. Like the show is good. There's 4 good seasons.
The only
3 really good seasons.
Like
one that's still pretty good. Season 5 isn't even good. People always say season 8. Like
I think after the Battle of the Bastards, it kind of like fucking.
I think even the Battle of the Bastards. Like here's the thing: Ramsay is never as satisfying or as fun as Joffrey ever is.
Okay, yeah.
It's just true. Ramsay is too. Here's the thing: when you
cartoonishly evil.
Yes,
sometimes.
he's predictable.
Like
you never know.
This guy is obsessed with dogs. Like the dogs are totally gonna eat someone.
But Joffrey, you never know.
Yeah, because he's.
You never know. Sometimes he's gonna. Like for instance, they give him some really cool throwaway lines. Like there's this one part where he's talking about how they should raise like a national army, and he's basically like in shorthand he explains like the rise of the nation state. And it's like what he wants to do, and he's like, why would we like let all the feudal lords have the power? Like shouldn't like
I have the centralization of power,
right? Exactly. And like the best part about
I sit on the throne.
The best part about it is that he's saying this to Tyrion, Jaime's dad. What's his name again?
Robert.
No, wait, no. That's his dad. His grandfather.
Oh, fucking
Lannister.
Oh my God.
He's saying this to his grandpa, and his grandpa's like, "Look, you don't know about stuff. You're like an idiot. And
you're kind of like 12.
Yeah, exactly. But the best part about it is he's totally right. And like, you know, that if you literally like look at through history, like at some point, like every country on earth like stops letting like local feudal lords handle military, and like the nation takes
centralization of power.
And so the fact that that Joffrey like says things like that, does things like that, and then the next scene is like torturing a prostitute to death, it's fucking wild. It's a wild ride. You never know where he's going to go. He zigs, he zags. Joffrey's the shit. Joffrey's such a good character. I love him so much. And
no one filled the throne quite like he did.
Well, and the best part about it is that he is working kind of like he's working symbiotically with characters like Tyrion, who the audience loves. Right? Like they have the same shared goals.
He's almost to an extent like manipulated by almost every adult in his life.
Totally. But he pushes back on interesting places, right? Like his mom's like, don't kill, Ned Stark. And he's like, I'm gonna kill Ned Stark. She's like, don't do. Whoa, wait, dude. Boom, too late. You know what I mean? It's great. I love it. The show's awesome.
It was literally just to show that his mom that it was just like, I'm not gonna listen to you this time, mommy.
But like Joffrey dying marks the death of the show, because the last good stuff that happens in the show is the trial Tyrion goes through for having killed him, right? Like the Sand Snake, like Oberyn, one of the best characters, very short-lived character, but one of the best characters. And basically, when he gets killed fighting the Mountain, like the show's pretty much over. And they never figure out what to do with any of the other characters, what to do with them, like ever again, pretty much.
Yeah, I guess.
Because think about it, Jaime's already back. He's already lost his hand.
I'm just thinking like all the payoffs for every like subsequent like kind of season finale, whether it be like the Battle of the Bastards or when Jon Snow is excommunicated from like the Night's Watch, right? And I'm just like, is that really the payoff that I was invested in this entire season that really made it worth it? I'm like, man, I could have just like gotten this all done in like one season.
Which is crazy though, because like the show it treats kind of like I also think that like the show starts becoming like, so the early parts of the show don't have the budget to do big battles. So what they do is they have all these cool duels. And the duels are more exciting and
Well,
more
not just
interesting
not just that, but
narratively
it's also like
than the
the
big
show
battles do.
early on plays more into the political game.
Yeah.
And like the small skirmishes being representative of larger conflicts, like in the background.
Right.
It's like they're all shell games essentially.
Yeah.
And this is like how shell games kind of worked back in the day, or
Mhm.
back in the day of Westeros.
Yeah, you know, good old Westeros.
Good old.
I got a lot of Westerosi ancestors myself.
But yeah, these are all kind of Cold War proxy conflicts to an extent. And like,
well, and it's funny because you can tell that they'd love to like have covered like the Battle of the Whispering Wood or whatever.
Yeah.
Like they would love to cover like Robb and Jaime like on the field of battle, and they don't have the resources to do it. And then what they end up covering is kind of instead more interesting.
yeah, it's just the highlighting of like the narrative political aspect of it that I don't think is necessarily the forefront of everyone's mind when you think of high fantasy drama or high fantasy series in general.
I love stuff like the duel between Vardis Egan and Bronn. You know, where Vardis Egan has like this really heavy armor.
Mm-hmm.
He's got this little plated armor. He's got a huge sword, and Bronn has like kind of like a smaller sword and isn't wearing any armor. And he just like tires him out, and then like stabs underneath his armor between the throat, just bleeds him out, and then pushes him through the hole. And it tells this incredible, interesting story. You know, there's like it's like a sequence that was like written instead of
it's
just
literally like the inverse of like the mountain versus it's like Oberon, right? That's Pedro Pascal's character, right?
Right.
It's like he has the advantage at first.
Yeah. No, it's great, and it seems like he kind of gets a little cocky at the end. And
that's
even
the whole
that's
thing,
kind of
and
fun.
that's like what fucks you over.
Yeah.
It's like
it's so fun though.
the battle
Watching
was
people
not
lose,
over.
like it's really fun. Like on hubris and like a fatal little kind of like an Achilles heel. It's so satisfying. It's so fun. There's also another sequence really early where the Dothraki have like turned on Daenerys, and one of the Dothraki swordsman guys like who's Ian Glenn's characters? He plays the guy who sold the slaves and then gets excommunicated.
He's the guy with grayscale, right?
Yeah, he does get grayscale later. But anyways, there's this sequence where he's talking to the Dothraki, and the Dothraki are like, "No, it's like way better to be fast than it is to be like tough." And he's like, "I don't know, like Westerosi like armor is like actually pretty good and pretty sweet." And this guy comes up with like a Dothraki, a Jorah Mormont. And he comes up with like one of the Dothraki swords, and he tries to like kill Jorah to get to Daenerys and kill her. And then the sword gets stuck in his armor, and Jorah just like bisects him. And it's those little moments that kind of tell you an interesting little story just in a piece of action is really great. And by the time they're just like shooting dragon fire into like giant pits of zombies, like there's nothing there. There's nothing to glean from it.
Right. It's no longer like a human conflict at that point. It's mobs versus mobs.
One, it's like empty spectacle.
Yeah, I can see what you're saying.
Whereas like a duel is like an interesting, like you learn something about each of the characters through how they fight.
Well, because like it's a personal conversation. It's a conversation had through action, not dialogue necessarily. Right. You learn more, like the whole actions speak louder than words. Yeah, you learn more about characters in a duel than you do than talking most of the time.
Right.
Like think of like what is it? Is it the Game of Death? Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris,
right?
Because they don't say a word to each other. Not just that, but it's implied that they don't even speak each other's languages. Because Bruce Lee's from comes from Hong Kong, and when he shows up, he tries to order food, and he's like, eggs, and they go, what? And he just points at the menu because he's in Italy at that point,
right?
So he and Chuck Norris have this entire one-on-one duel, and you learn a lot about these two guys. They're two honorable guys because Chuck Norris doesn't fight like any of the other people that Bruce Lee has fought at that point. If anything, he fights kind of like Bruce Lee, except he's like tough. Right. So you learn that like he's like a brick wall, and Bruce Lee is like water hitting a brick wall. So he's got to kind of figure out a way to get around that or work his way, find some cracks somewhere.
No, totally. And I actually think that those kinds of duel like scenarios, they're very satisfying to watch.
Yeah.
But I think that like big with a bunch of people can be interesting too. Like for instance, like in Rumble in the Bronx, when Jackie Chan's like fighting all those guys in like the and there's like all the pinball machines. You know what I mean? It's like one guy versus a bunch of people, or there's that part where they're throwing all the bottles at him, the glass is shattering everywhere, and he's diving like around. Like you can involve a lot more people in a conflict, and it can still have that kind of element to it, where you're like learning a bunch about the characters and about like the world building and stuff like that.
But in that case, are you learning about the?
But you have to write it.
Are you learning about the individual characters aside from like Jackie's character in Rumble in the Bronx? Are you learning about you
learn about the gang,
the overarching like character of the gang and like the Bronx in quotation,
right?
Whereas I would argue,
but it has like a world building element. It's like an action sequence, but you're like learning about the world they live in through it.
Another good example I would argue is Master Splinter versus the Shredder in the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie on the roof.
Go ninja, go ninja, go.
That's Turtles 2, but
okay, sorry.
The sentiment is there.
I'm mixing up Turtles over here.
So
which one's that? That's Secret of the Ooze.
Yes. Yeah. So it goes Turtles 2, Secret of the Ooze, and then Turtles 3, Turtles in Time.
Turtles in Time. Hell yeah. Wait, there's a Turtles in Time movie?
Yes.
That's hilarious. So I've played Turtles in Time on the Super Nintendo, and I've played Turtles in Time in the arcade.
There's also an arcade cabinet.
But there's a Turtles in Time movie.
I think there's also a Turtles in Time.
Wait, do they like go back to like samurais and stuff? Oh my god, that's so sick.
Yeah, and they call them kappa because they're like.
They do look like kappa. Yeah, that's awesome. Kappa, by the way, are like these weird like.
They suck your soul out the bubble.
They're like these weird like turtley kind of frog guys who live in rivers. They're like, what do you call them? They're kind of like yokai, kind of like spiritual. They're a folklore character from Japanese culture. From
they're Japanese yokai. Culture. They have like a pool, a puddle or thing on the top of their head that they have to keep.
Sometimes it depicts them like having like almost like a friar's haircut.
Yeah, or like a lily pad.
Yeah,
that's what makes it look like a friar's haircut.
Mm-hmm.
They are kind of turtley.
They're a little turtley,
like,
yeah, for sure.
I think the term
I've seen some like block prints
is like a derived from kappa.
Really?
I think that's the whole thing. That's how like what it is. It's like a corruption, like when you like corrupt the word.
I didn't know that, but that's interesting
because that's also why Bowser and like his Koopa Troopas are turtles.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, kappa are cute and funny.
Yeah,
I've seen a lot of.
But the climax of Ninja Turtles, because the Turtles can't beat Shredder, because they're too weak to beat Shredder at that moment. Okay. So Splinter shows up.
But does he become Super Shredder?
No, that's in Turtles 2.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Is your like major Turtles experience like Turtles 2, like Vanilla Ice, the Ninja Turtles rap? Like,
I feel like that's a good question. I don't remember. Here's the thing. For me, they're kind of blended all together. It's a very similar experience. Like if you were to ask me about a sequence from Gremlins, I might not be able to remember which Gremlins it's from. You know what I mean? Like I know objectively that the Manhattan one is 2, and that the one with the Corey Feldman is 1, but I don't like it. But there are certain sequences where I wouldn't remember, like if Gizmo did that in 1 or 2, and that's the same for me with the like any movie I haven't seen in like 30 years.
Damn, are you telling me you haven't seen Ninja Turtles in 30 years?
I mean, I saw them when I was a kid. Like, they were really popular movies when I was a kid.
Watched them last Tuesday, man.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Jesus. Actual last Tuesday?
Yeah.
Like that last week?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I probably haven't seen those. Those are the kinds of movies that I so like before Blockbuster had forced my local video store
out of business, and then they were eventually forced out of business by Netflix.
Yeah, before Blockbuster ruined the community I grew up in by surreptitiously hoarding new releases so that other video stores couldn't have them.
So that my community could be born in the Blockbuster.
So when Blockbuster was building the bricks of its own demise, when it was a first hoist of its own petard, we were renting the Turtles movies. Like that was a common rental. I think we rented the Turtles movies back in the day, and I always rented the Ewok Adventures. But those are Mortal Kombat. That was one we liked to rent. But yeah, I don't remember which one is from.
Honestly, these are some classics. Did you ever rent Droids?
The cartoon show?
Yeah.
Maybe.
My Blockbuster they had the cutout for like the Droids VHS, but it was never there.
Yeah.
And I would always go in and be like, oh, is droids there? Because it was the one Star Wars property at the time that I like hadn't really seen.
Mm-hmm. Did you see the Ewok Adventures?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like the cartoon, right?
No, they're live action.
Oh, the one with what is it? Is it Wicket?
Yeah.
And he's got like the really big bug eyes, and they're hanging out with like this human blonde child.
Yeah, that's her name is Sindel or Cinder, something like that.
So
But yeah, there's two of them.
I have very vague memories of that one. The one that I watched more of was like the one that looks animated by the Care Bears. Like it looks like Care Bears kind of.
Yeah, but they made this was crazy. When I was a kid, there were 5 live action Star Wars movies, and it seemed like most people were not aware of that. But yeah, I would like rent. We would go in, and I had seen the first 3 Star Wars movies so many times that eventually I just got obsessed with especially because like my favorite thing about Star Wars at the time when I was a kid was the Ewoks, and then of course there's 2 live action Ewok movies.
Dude, my whole thing was the holiday special. Like I had a secret obsession with the holiday special purely for the Boba Fett, like with the
cartoon.
Yeah, cartoon Boba Fett.
So sick.
Because like I was like, how do I find this Boba Fett? Why is he colored different?
Yeah.
I want this alternate color now.
Yeah. Well, his gun he has and that is so cool.
Yes, and then you get that event. I think now in current Star Wars, which is like. Whatever.
Yeah, but Boba Fett's a good guy now, so it doesn't matter.
It doesn't even fucking matter. What's the point of having a badass bad guy?
He's just gonna be a good guy.
What's the point of killing him off if he's just gonna?
I just don't like it. Like, there's this line in the trailer that basically was telling me I wasn't gonna want to see this thing. It's like, oh, Jabba the Hutt ran this place out of fear. I'm gonna run it out of respect. It's like, what? What?
Since when are you a sheriff? Since when are you a fucking sheriff? Like, I get it's a Star Wars is Western. And
I know, but
like,
do you remember when Darth Vader had to tell him no disintegrations? This guy fucking disintegrates people.
Like,
he has a reputation for disintegrating people.
Like,
and now he's gonna rule this place out of respect. Like what kind of,
it says
what kind of fucking kindergarten fucking bullshit is this? This is something that my kindergarten teacher would have said. She's like, you know what? Maybe your last kindergarten teacher ran this place out of fear, but I'm gonna run it out of respect. Like, you kids, and now how much you love your Resident Evil, but here we got Resident Rainbow.
Things went one way, but now you guys are in the 2nd grade.
Exactly.
So things are different now.
Yeah. We're in the big leagues now.
We gotta put on your big kid pants.
However, they did it in 3rd grade. This is 4th grade now.
I don't know what they taught you.
I don't know what they taught you
back in elementary school, but this is the 6th grade. This is when things get serious.
This is when things get serious.
High schools,
every level of your life, somebody's gonna tell you, well, I don't know what you did the last time, but this is where it gets serious.
Did they ever hit you with your permanent record, like in middle school, like as if that's even a real thing?
I don't think anybody dropped the permanent record.
Oh my god! I don't know what the fucking deal is.
There was like an unnecessary level of leniency about that stuff. Unless you got in jail, like nothing was actually that serious back then, which is pretty crazy.
Like you got into fights.
You had to actually go to prison.
Fights.
Yeah,
and it's just like, hey. Don't do that.
It's funny though,
and then you just went on with your day.
I do remember there was a lot of performative concern. Like if you really wanted to not get in trouble, like the level of trouble you got in was entirely dependent on how hard you were willing to cry after you were caught.
Yeah.
If you cried hard enough,
they just wouldn't care.
You're like the level. Like, are you getting suspended or are you just getting your parents called? Depends on how much you cry.
Like, oh.
So if you cry really hard,
really bad,
they're just gonna call mom and dad. But if you don't cry and you act unremorseful, you're gonna get suspended for fighting.
Like,
there's a lot of fighting in Grosse Point, to be honest. Anyways, we're talking about Oldboy.
Oh my god, I forgot. That was such a long intro. Welcome back to the show. We were talking about Oldboy. I know 2 weeks now. We said that we would do like a double feature.
And I'm back in black. We changed our minds. We're actually saving Zinda
for another day.
Yeah, we're gonna save it.
We're probably gonna pair it with another thing that is very predictable. Something. It's a Spike Lee joint.
A Spike Lee joint.
If you're familiar with his joints.
If you're familiar with Josh Brolin jerking off.
I like some of his joints. I'm a big
fan. Especially I like Do the Right Thing.
I love Spike Lee. I think he's a fantastic director. Mm-hmm. He has such a interesting visual language and visual style.
I like his acting. I think he's really funny and quirky, and I like to hear him talk.
I think
He's an iconic piece of
kind of
like
funny, like in
90,
real life too.
just like he's got just that like I don't know. There's like a bunch of like just people I really like from movies when I was younger.
What? I feel like I've met like people that kind of dress like Spike Lee, if that makes sense.
I think
it's like
Spike Lee's a pretty fashionable guy though. So if you have him, that's pretty good.
With like the baseball cap tilted to the side, it's a New York Mets cap or something, or maybe it's a Nets cap. I don't know. Then he's got like the
he does love some whack ass sports teams.
Yeah, he. I mean, have you been to a Mets game?
No, I'm just a hater. I'm from Detroit. we got one of each sports team, so I gotta be a hater on everybody else. We got Tigers, we got Lions, we got Red Things. Now the Bears are in Chicago, but we got we got our own sports team. So I gotta talk shit when I can. But yeah, no, I like Spike Lee a lot. I think he's really funny and charming. It does feel like I've been watching clips of him talking about that movie, and it does feel like he didn't really care about it that much.
It seems like that was more like a paycheck job.
Yeah, which is unfortunate. But I do think that he made some interesting choices, and I will be excited to talk about them when we get there.
Right. And Zinda, which I happen to watch, is oh my god, I can't wait to talk about that one. That one is, I think, in my opinion, still better than the Spike Lee one. Only in some degrees, and that's me being super lenient because I'm also like kind of a fan of masala films or masala style filmmaking, which like it's not everyone's cup of tea. Can
you define masala style films for anybody who's curious?
So this is like this was a term that I was told about by one of my friends who is also really into like Indian movies and Bollywood and stuff like that, where masala is the general term for like generally liked. It has a little bit, it's intentionally made to have a little bit of everything, so any audience, specifically like general audiences from like in this case not children, but like maybe young or older middle-aged teens to like even like grandparents can all go and see
a crossover audience.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Because like in places like India, where movies, the cost of a movie is exponentially higher or proportionally much higher on the people.
Oh, is it cost a lot more to see a movie?
Yeah.
Okay, like movie theaters are an expensive experience in India?
Not necessarily it's an expensive experience, it's just because proportionate to income there.
Oh, okay.
Like that makes sense. Same deal happens in, I think, the Philippines and like certain Southeast Asian countries.
Okay.
Where it's like, that is considered a luxury experience, much more of a luxury experience than in the States.
Right.
Because in the States, we kind of have...
we have an expectation that everybody can go see a movie.
Exactly.
Like a movie
and then we have like we have the whole concept of... so the States, this is kind of like a cinema history thing, but we kind of coined the idea of multiplex cinemas. Like multiplex cinemas weren't really a thing that existed until like mall culture and stuff like that.
Totally. We actually have lots of theaters in Detroit that are like were designed and built. Like the Michigan Theater was one that were with they're like 1,000-person seating for one screen.
Yep.
Fucking wild.
Right? And then
1,000 people would sit down all together to watch a silent film.
And one
movie, yeah.
And maybe you get a double feature or like one matinee and then at night it's a different film, but like multiplex cinemas were like a game changer essentially, and that it also kind of killed smaller theaters and
well, suburbanization in general, like completely scrambled every business. You know what I mean? So in Detroit, the malls were basically invented in Detroit, and this is true. This is 100% true. Yeah. And Hudson, who was originally like a developer of department stores, basically was like, we got to figure out shopping for all these people who are like moving out to the suburbs,
right?
And
everything in one.
Yeah, it was not unlike what happened when like Amazon started like not selling stuff other than books,
right? Whereas Amazon's case is just like direct sales or direct marketing or whatever.
But it was a blender situation where it completely shook up and changed the way people spent money,
right?
And where money was spent.
And in that case, so masala filmmaking is done with the intention to hit as many audience demographics as possible. Like men, women, teens, elderly, because if they're gonna spend their money on a movie, you gotta try and get the entire family.
Okay, well, just everything you just said sounds like the like Oldboy's the worst idea. Like
Like
everything you just said is incompatible with Oldboy,
yeah.
like on a fundamental level.
Yeah, this is kind of also why I have very mixed feelings about Zinda.
Like, would you show your grandparents Oldboy?
No,
I kind of would, but it's because I'm a fucked up person.
Okay, but here's the funny thing: my grandparents have seen Oldboy.
Have they?
Yeah.
Well, there you go. So your grandparents are just cool. Mine would be so confused, and I will still do it. You know what I mean? Gran, I might make you watch this movie. I still think you might think it's good. I don't know. It's a perfect movie. So it's the first movie we've gotten to talk about that is a perfect movie. Perfect movies do exist, and this is our first opportunity to talk about one.
I guess also content warning. It is Oldboy.
It's a fucked up movie.
It's a fucked up movie. But yeah, also it's a perfect movie. Also,
it's a perfect movie, and it's a fucked up.
If for some reason you haven't
it's
seen
perfectly
Oldboy,
fucked up.
do yourself a favor.
Don't talk to us. Don't listen to us.
Listen to us.
Yeah, get the fuck out of here. Go watch
Come back
Oldboy.
later.
It's a perfect movie.
Like it's 2 hours and not a single second of that movie is wasted.
And it's perfectly what I like that we're getting to talk about it so early is because we've been talking a lot about manga adaptations, and this is probably the best one.
This is another manga adaptation, a adaptation of the same name but spelled differently. There's a space in the manga title. So in the Oldboy in 2003, South Korean neo-noir thriller directed by Park Chan-wook. Is an adaptation of Oldboy, space between old and boy, which is a seinen manga written by Garon Tsuchiya and illustrated by Nobuaki Minegishi.
With a lot of creative liberties taken from the source material.
A lot of creative liberties taken from the source material, in my opinion, and I think this is the general opinion, improvements, like just general improvements to the source material. Like, I don't think anyone is arguing that Oldboy the manga is bad or anything. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that the film Oldboy is better in terms of narrative complexity and just, general storytelling than the manga and the source material that it is derived from.
Totally. But I will say that the manga has really good bone structure.
Yeah.
What it's taking from is really
they're
good.
very different.
Right. It's true. It's true.
Like,
and tonally, they're very different.
Like, here's a spoiler for a 40-year-old manga. The theme of the manga is isolation and human isolation and understanding loneliness. And the fact that the villain he doesn't want to be understood. No matter how lonely he is, he doesn't want another person to know what that loneliness feels, or he doesn't enjoy the fact that he's understood by someone else. And that's the only reason why he does it, which is kind of a weaker reasoning, in my opinion. It's
everything about the motivations and all the little twists and stuff added by the movie
the setup is the same between the movie and the manga.
Right.
Yeah, it's like this guy, he's a salary.
But the plot twist isn't there, and the reveals aren't there.
There's not as much as emotional weight or
no.
But Oldboy is a fairly popular movie, I would say.
Exceptionally popular. But I actually think it's funny because I hear people, the most interesting conversations I've heard about this movie are literally in YouTube comments. Like, I couldn't find like really good like video essays about it. I couldn't really find, like, especially it's really interesting, especially when you're into like stuff like Berserk. Like, you'll see like a new like 45-minute video essay for it come out like every couple months.
How are you making like hour-long episodes about one chapter where it's very minimal development? I mean, I get it. I love Berserk too.
Mm-hmm. But what I mean though is this is a wildly celebrated movie. It's one of those movies everybody like just assumes that you need to see. But people don't really talk about it in that way, and I think that's really interesting. I think a lot of people.
The whole point is like just watch it, and then you kind of get it.
Although I don't know though, because some of these comments are pretty interesting.
I think they're just being intentionally ignorant, or like facetiously ignorant.
Maybe I don't know, because like the likes suggest that people I don't know. For instance, I saw actually let's go through the story first, because then once we've gone through the story, then I can come back to like whatever these like super spicy YouTube comment takes are, and I can address them. But let's deal with like the actual like meat and potatoes of the movie.
No
first.
problem at all. So the story starts in media res with Choi Min-sik's character Oh Tae-soo holding this guy Oh Kwan-rok, the suicidal man, I think that's what he's called in credits, over a ledge by his necktie, and then he's like, you're gonna listen to my story. And this is honestly probably the best way to open any film.
It's so good. No, it's so good. It's so good. And like a lot of movies, I think try to open in media res,
and they just absolutely fail.
Yeah, they don't really sell that this is in the middle of something. There's something about holding a guy over the ledge of a building by his tie that you feel like you're coming in a like whoa, what the hell's going on?
Not just that, but it's also
it's abrupt
and total misdirect.
Yeah,
like,
totally.
It's a complete he's like holding a dog. You think, oh, this guy's like in trouble or whatever.
Right.
Like,
that's true. That's true.
Like
true. There's a vulnerability.
Yeah. No. Because like. Yeah. It's so intentional and obvious too because it's a fucking dog. Like, what person? This is like the John Wick effect. Like, what person is not going to feel sympathetic to one, a man in danger, and then two, he's holding an animal. Yeah. So then it's almost like he's.
Yeah. It's almost like It's like is he holding this person up? Is he like torturing this person? Is he kidnapping this person? It really is. It really spins you around.
And then all he says is, "You're going to listen to my story." And then it immediately cuts back to 1988, and he's like,
fine year, by the way. Greatest person I know was born that year.
So he's Odesu is drunk out of his mind, like on the street. It's his daughter's birthday, and he's missing it. And he gets pulled into. I think he's already in a police station, or does he get pulled into a police station or whatever?
It pretty much opens with it basically jumps from him holding this guy by his tie off the ledge of a building to he's in the police station. He's been detained for being like a huge pain in the ass, dickhead, drunk guy, which is actually also very funny because I've heard many people over the years joke that the police in South Korea are like basically drunk people babysitters. Yep. And that's fucking hilarious because this scene is literally depicting that.
So like I haven't been there in a while. Okay, so again, newsflash: I am Korean.
Ryan's Korean, guys.
So
he watched this movie without subs. So he really knows what happened in this movie. I just gotta believe that the subs are telling me what really happened. I just have to hope.
There are some like lines and jokes that are kind of mistranslated by subs that I have seen in the past. Honestly. For me, it's kind of practice because I don't get to use it too often. But so I haven't been in Korea in a long time. But the last time I went, I think Korea was purporting like its lowest crime rate ever or something like that. Mm-hmm. And essentially, most of the crimes were related to alcohol misdemeanors.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
you see this stuff like this on YouTube a lot. Like, people really love just like covering really like drunk people like in East Asia. There's like a lot of YouTube content that's just hammered people like from Japan or Korea or wherever, China.
Japan, Korea, Hong Kong, Thailand is another
just like
place.
People face down in the mud like fucking
God.
Just shit faced drunk.
Oh, have you ever seen like the club culture videos from like Korea where like it's like lines like at like 6 a.m., 7 a.m. because people are still clubbing that for that long.
Yeah. But and also I think Korea has like amongst countries on the planet like some of the highest alcohol consumption per person.
Yes. I think Korea has one of the highest alcohol
like per volume per person.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Not just that, but also one of the highest rates of alcoholism.
I'm certain. Yeah. I've never met a Korean person who believes in alcoholism.
I don't. So I don't drink super heavily, but I do know several Koreans and like my family members that also drink more casually, and it's kind of like culturally ingrained. It's definitely like
I've met Korean people who literally, because I've been sober 10 years. I've met Korean people who tell me they don't trust me because I don't drink. They're like, something wrong with this guy. I don't fucking like it.
There was a long period of time where I was also like, I don't drink at all. Like, and when hanging out with my Korean friends, they stopped inviting me out to places because I don't drink with them.
Brutal. You're just like, you're not Korean unless you drink. Get the fuck out of here.
And I don't know. It's fine.
But the sequence itself is genius, and Park Chan-wook. Park Chan-wook makes this like ridiculous drunk like buffoon into it's pure cinema. It's fucking amazing. So like there's
it's so funny.
Yeah, it's really funny. It's really charming. It's really
also sad
and like totally sad and very sophomoric.
Yeah,
Yeah. But at the same time, in the middle of those tonal like vibes, there's a lot of information There's a lot of information being digested by the audience in a very subtle way, and this movie's just like the king of subtlety. It's
I mean,
so
not
fucking
just,
subtle.
but like we were talking about earlier, like how much expository dialogue. Because like this manga is long. It's like 8 volumes, 1,600 plus pages or something like that. That's a lot of content. That's a lot. And they had to condense all of that into a 2-hour movie. So a lot of the dialogue that these characters are saying is expository. It is purely expository. Just who I am, what I'm about at this moment, what's going on with me in my life at this moment, stuff like that, my intentions, my goals, whatever. And it's like weaved in with like these moments of like comedic slapstick or like pity
or drama or like every possible tone can be hit in a way that is informative and enjoyable at a simultaneous experience. And every sequence like that feels like a payoff is usually also building towards another sequence.
This is a movie you can watch without sound and you would like still get a solid, enjoyable experience out of it. Because a lot of it is told visually.
Definitely. And it's there's a lot of visual diversity in it, like the shot diversity, composition.
There's no boring shot, no like boring shot composition, no like uninteresting form of blocking, every single shot and scene in this movie is composed to absolute perfection.
Pretty much.
It's this. Like you said earlier, this is like a perfect film. Yeah, there's a reason why it's regarded so highly.
No, totally. I mean, even like within this genre, like it's like I've seen a lot of noir movies. The only one that even like I think this one and like maybe Sunset Boulevard, I think are close. But it's just like it's really incredible. I mean, as a movie, but also just like in all of the experiences that it gives you. And like the thing though is that like especially in the sequence that we're talking about, what is the movie treats every moment like it's a simultaneously enjoyable, like it's like it has its own value. You know, so like every scene may be like hitting like a different tone or different emotionality, but none of them are setting up to other sequences any more than they are payoffs for themselves. And I do think that like especially sequences like American Hollywood cinema is constantly trying to trade off between like dropping a shitload of exposition on you and then giving you like an action payoff sequence, dropping a shitload of exposition on you, and then you giving you like
for example, this is the blah 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 quadrant. We have to get we have to get the fuel cells, but in order to get the fuel cells, we need to pay off the crime syndicate. But in order for the crime syndicate, we have to do this run. But blah blah blah, and then they just do that.
Right.
Whereas in this case, it's like said and done at the same time almost.
And it's seamless.
Yeah, absolutely.
You almost never notice that you're being you don't notice that you're
not
applying
being
information.
Told anything. Or you don't think you're being told anything. You're just absorbing this like fucking okay.
It's honestly this movie is performing like almost like sleights of hand with information.
Yeah. It's like look over here and then it's like doing stuff this over here.
I think that the him wanting to pee in the corner is like the perfect example of that. So in the sequence where we're speaking about, he's been arrested for being a drunk asshole and just being like a general.
The cops are like, terror. Dude, just sit down, chill out, please. Like I gotta sit here for like another several hours for the shift.
And as a wasted drunk person, he keeps trying to tell them about his daughter and about his life and just things about himself. But in between each of those beats, he keeps trying to go pee in a corner that is not a bathroom. And then, and then eventually they handcuff him or whatever. But like he'll be like, I have a daughter, and this is like an important piece of information. I'm gonna go over there to pee. And then and every time he comes back from trying to pee in the corner, he drops another interesting piece of information.
It's her birthday.
I
got these wings for her as a gift.
Right. And it's so subtle.
Her mom and I have like been having problems, but I'm gonna show her or whatever.
Right.
Like, oh, did you call my friend? He should be here. Blah blah blah. And then his friend shows up. Li Sua. Wait, no, that's not him.
Who's the friend?
No Ju Hwan, which is played by Chi Tae-han. That's Tetsu's friend. And honestly, he's way too good for this guy. I don't know why he bails him out like this. Then he talks to his wife on the phone and he's like, "Oh, don't worry, I'm gonna get him home. He's gonna be fine." And it's just like, he's drunk, isn't he? And he's like, "No, it's not that bad. It's not that bad." Like, this guy is Tesu doesn't deserve.
Well, also you do
True
later
attention.
you do learn later that they've been friends for a very long time.
Yeah.
But you also learn later that Desu has been a piece of shit pretty much the entire time.
Yeah. Like,
He's
this is
been just like someone who's like really overconfident,
not
like
just that,
thinks
but,
very
like,
highly of themselves.
Once, because like during that sequence, Tesu is just kidnapped, disappears.
Right.
He gets disappeared.
Yeah, they go to a payphone and they call his wife and his daughter. And of course, it's his daughter's birthday. He's supposed to be with his daughter, and he's being just a drunk maniac. But he goes missing.
He talks to her on the phone for a little bit,
Right.
and then, like, you know, he puts his friend back on because he's a drunk asshole. It's
Yeah.
like, why the fuck are you talking to your daughter when you're that fucking wasted?
Yeah.
Like, you're saying, great memories, Dad.
Thanks for the memories, Dad.
And, like, you know, he turns around for a second, and the next thing you know, it's just the wings on the ground. And you're like, holy shit, this guy got fucking taken.
Mm-hmm.
And the immediate next shot is just so oppressive. There's just a slot in a door.
Yeah.
And all you see is a shoe and a face through the slot. And it's Otesu's face, like, through the slot, trying to speak to this guy. And this guy doesn't even doesn't acknowledge his existence even.
Yeah, it's really cold.
Yeah. It's just
a really
boot.
cold interaction.
It's just a boot, the
Yeah.
ground, and a slot in a door.
Yeah.
And he's like, he begs him. He says, "I'll do anything. I'll give you money." Blah blah blah. And then he threatens him, and then he apologizes. This entire wave of emotions. It's like kind of like he's vomiting up anything he can, like any emotion for sympathy or whatever that he can.
Yeah.
And then he just gets dumplings. The slot closes, and that's it. And
What's kind of interesting and weird about it too is he's so desperate for like a real person to interact with,
anyone.
and then the person gives him nothing. Nothing. And you can tell that he's like been there for a long time, and he's starting to like realize the potential severity of the situation. And I do think that there's also just like this weird seedy like world building, because they eventually let him out of this place and whatever, but he comes back to it later, and then you even find out that another facility like it has been built, and there's like this weird kind of world building that like private like prisons like these,
maybe private prisons shouldn't exist.
it's so creepy. It's so weird. But they're also not really, they're not even private prisons the way we think about them. Like, they're secret private prisons, right?
So just private prisons.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. But there's this element at which they can exist in any city block you walk past.
Yeah.
Could just be one of these.
Because it's a hidden floor. It's floor 7.5.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the guy who runs it, the warden, Mr. Park, who's played by Otarsu, is told by Lee Woo-jin, who's the villain, who's played by Yuji Tae,
who's incredible, by the way.
Who's one of the greatest villains in cinema.
Yeah, he's so good.
Hands down, one of the greatest villains in cinema.
Yeah, I think so too.
That, you know, he tells him, it's like, I built a new building for you.
Yeah.
Got more floors, it's got nicer amenities. So it's just a real estate game.
So interesting.
It's just
so
a real
weird.
estate game.
I know, but it's so weird to think about that. There's like this entire like you can't help but wonder, what are all the other people who are in here for?
You know what's even?
What are the other situations that other people are being captured and held captive?
Not even
in
just
spaces?
that, but like, you know what was even crazier to me is so this is something that we talked about a little bit, and something that I picked up more on because, you know, I think I'm just older and have a greater context for it all now. The undercurrent of anti-capitalism that exists in the movie, kind of, that they are paying to keep people in essentially a pretty nice one room, flat or a studio, to be imprisoned there. But in the film, you see you can see homeless people. Like, there are homeless people there.
Yeah, it's true, because Lee Woo-jin even hires them to do stuff for him.
Yeah. So, and Lee Woo-jin's entire character is, he inherited his wealth, and he's executing his personal vengeance or personal vendetta on
all the main characters have gone to private schools, by the way.
Yeah, that's true.
They all go to Catholic school together.
But Lee Woo-jin is executing his individual personal will on this one guy.
Yeah.
and he's doing so.
It's like one of the greatest overreactions ever, and that's part of what makes it so interesting and so weird too, because it's like it's really crazy. I mean, we'll get to it in a minute, but it's like honestly, to me, I get really like there's one level in which there's a physical kind of punishment that's being exacted on Daesu by being kept in a like kind of a prison and kind of a jail cell.
Yeah.
But it seems like the emotional, intellectual torture is so much deeper and more powerful and painful. Like, because this isn't like
because it wasn't never really physical torture.
Yeah, never.
It was all.
In fact, they won't even let him hurt himself.
Yeah. He tries to kill himself at one point. He shatters a mirror,
and they stop him.
Yeah, they knock him out. They suture his wounds. They take away the glass.
Yeah,
they're like, you're not getting out of this way. Like,
and I love that the blood is on the floor and the carpet for the rest.
Yeah.
Of the time.
They're not going to clean it up. It's just there now.
Yeah.
It's to remind you that you can't kill yourself.
But what's really interesting is when you go to jail, like it seems like there's like a lot of like physical punishment when you go to jail. But what's interesting is that he doesn't go to jail and then like have like time in the yard.
Well, not even just that. It's just like
he's alone.
He goes to jail and is immediately put into solitary confinement.
Exactly.
Which is considered inhumane. It's considered an inhumane form of punishment.
Right.
It's torture. It's literally torture. And
humans are social beings.
Yeah. And which ties into like another visual aspect of it, because then he starts to hallucinate about ants.
Yeah.
All over his skin, crawling
out of his skin, even
in his skin, underneath his skin, out of his orifices, stuff like that.
The thing with the mice really touches me too.
He makes some friends.
He makes friends with these mice, and
they give him a tasty treat.
And when they disappear for some reason, I don't know, like fucks me up. When the mice disappear, like really.
That was like the only living thing that he interacted with and had like a relatively positive interaction with at that point.
Yeah.
Because the only other thing that's in there is a TV.
Yeah.
That's
what's crazy too, though, is that he knows a bunch of stuff about the world because he's constantly watching television. It's the only thing he has, and so he doesn't really lose track of like how technology works. He doesn't really lose track of like current events. In fact, it's demonstrated that he's like pretty well informed about things.
Not even just that, but also the TV, I think, is part of the. So hypnotism is a big thing.
It is a big thing.
It's taken from the manga, so it's not like this is a new deal or whatever. But
it's remarked that he and the other deuteragonist, the woman that who's what's the name of the woman? Mido. Yeah, Mido. So it's specifically stated that each of them are particularly susceptible to hypnosis.
So I believe the television is part of the hypnosis, part of the programming.
That maybe makes sense, yeah.
And I don't think that's like a real big stretch, even because he sees something on TV, then immediately tries to emulate it.
Yeah.
He sees the taekwondo and the exercising on there. So what does he do? He draws an outline of a man.
Yeah.
And then starts practicing his bum fight martial arts, essentially.
His bum fight martial arts. That's fucking hilarious.
Because he's undisciplined. Yeah. That's his whole thing. He's a
wildly undisciplined person. Yeah. Actually, he's never a serious person, and by like being like everything that he goes through turns him into like it's really crazy too. Because he becomes like on one level he becomes like this terrifying badass, and on another level once he goes in there, he never has control over himself or his life ever again.
It's the whole his internal monologue where he refers to himself by his name, but then also refers to himself as like an animal or a beast.
As like a beast. Yeah, the guy whose tie he's holding when he's falling off a cliff says like, doesn't a beast deserve to live? And even though he has zero regard for that guy, you hear him like quoted a couple times. That
line just sticks with him the entire time.
Yeah.
And so for 15 years he's locked in this hotel room, essentially, monitored on cameras. They cut his hair and they knock him out with drugs, and they
do this. They do it even when he's not in there. They use those drugs all the time. It's also the story doesn't work without these miracle sleep drugs.
There's a lot of there's a lot of methods of hypnosis that goes on, from touch. I think because they're using all the senses in terms of hypnosis. I think they're using smell, sight, touch, sound, and taste.
Well, there's bells that are like the kind of the almost like the leitmotif of his hypnosis.
Right. and it just really makes it so. I think to an extent it is a bit of a you can't really trust Otezu at completely.
He's a kind of an unreliable narrator.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that was interesting when you were pointing out that like when Mito is reading his diaries that he's been keeping,
Right.
it's like what the hell is she even reading? Because like he was so incoherent in that experience. We have no idea like what the hell.
Because like he has this
It's
entire
true,
like
isn't
kind of
true.
monologue that he gives to himself like in the 15 years of prison, where he tries to keep his mind straight. And he's like, all I have is my memories, all I can do. So he just writes down anyone he's wronged, his entire life story.
Yeah, he's like well, at first he's trying to figure out who would imprison him.
right. And
Which-
it turns out it's a long list because
because he's he's a fucking asshole.
he's a piece of shit.
Yeah, because he's a fucking dick.
He's a womanizer. He cheats on
Yeah.
his wife.
Yeah.
He's a drunk. He's lazy at work. Apparently, he was rough at school. He's a fucking asshole.
Yeah, he's been kind of a dickhead like his whole life.
So it's really like, who doesn't have a reason to come after this guy?
Yeah. It is interesting though. Like it's also like I really like the way the movie is. The movie's very satisfying in how it addresses like the different stages of like almost grief as he goes through like during his imprisonment. Like it takes him 6 years before he realizes. It's funny. Like he accepts that it's going to be the long haul after 6 years. 6 years it takes for him,
Yeah.
and that's when he starts
That's
tattooing
where
himself.
That's where it kind of like clicks, where he's like, okay, I'm gonna be here for a
long
while.
time. Yeah. At 6 years in, he starts tattooing lines on his arm to keep track of the years that it's been.
Yep.
So the first time he tattoos himself, it's six lines, and then after that, it's just very very interesting.
And then he carves a little hole because he created a blind spot behind his bed. So he carve a hole into the wall, and he eventually does make it out, and it's raining.
yeah,
And
but it takes him. That's 15 years.
yeah,
in. And by the time that he's right about to break out,
they let him
they
go.
let him go.
And not even just that, but they let him
The
go.
way they let him go, what you pointed out about that sequence is so interesting, and I want to hear you describe it again.
It's so good. It's so big. This is why it goes back to my point where it's like, this is like, you can watch this with the sound off because it's like completely a visual language. So they lock him in a chest, and he just bursts out, and he's in this middle like of this grassy.
One of the
like,
iconic images of the movie is
Right.
him coming out of almost like a giant briefcase.
Yeah, and
basically.
all you see is this grass that
Yeah.
he's in, and he's surrounded by grass.
Yeah.
So it kind of gives you this implication that he's free. But that's just another misdirection, because that grass is just an artificial green space that sits on the
top of a
high-rise building. And it's the whole point of, he just left one prison and entered a much bigger prison.
Well, and it's funny because now as soon as he goes into prison, now no matter where he goes, the prison comes with him.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what that space is or wherever he goes, that's where the prison is too.
It also goes back to that whole quote from like, I think it's from the Bible. It's a Bible quote, because he went to a Catholic school called Evergreen, and that's part of the mystery. Or it's something like
because that's his connection to the person who's been doing all
something
this.
Like
is they went to school together.
Whether it's from like the deer in the hands of the hunter, or like the bird in the hands of a fowler, you must free yourself, or something like that. Tesu just needs to let go himself. The prison is himself. He is his own prison.
But he's also offered on many occasions for all of this to end. Like he's like, you can just do
you want revenge, or do you want the truth?
Yeah, do you want the truth or do you want revenge?
And then every single time
he pursues the truth
uh,
at the cost of
it's very much like an Oedipus kind of like one of the, what is it, Theban plays or whatever. It's like by Sophocles.
The Theban plays.
Yeah.
Thebes.
Like because Oedipus is
got a lot
told
of
by
problems
his mom wife that he doesn't know yet not to pursue this mystery.
His mom wife.
That's what happens.
His mom wife. It's actually, honestly, everything about this movie is super Oedipal.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
It's like an Oedipal noir.
Yeah.
It's a super Oedipal. What's crazy though is that it's like, so the Oedipal aspects of it then like later become like important themes in like Korean international cinema. And like Tale of Two Sisters and like Pieta, there's like all of these, like incest is a major theme of this as we open. That's why we're talking about Jamie Lannister in the beginning. Incest is a huge theme in this movie,
Yeah.
and it becomes a huge trend throughout like Korean international cinema. Like there's all these incest themes within like the canon of those movies, but this movie starts that and it introduces it where it wasn't, because there's no incest themes. At least there are, but not as many.
Yeah.
Certainly not for the main character in the manga.
Yep. I think for the film, it creates even greater parallel, and it makes like the whole point of it even heavier, if that makes sense.
It is. I mean, it is really heavy, and that's certainly maybe why they did it. But it's really funny too, because like I think a lot of people have problems with it, and I'm not surprised by that. That is exactly the thing that would trigger a Western audience.
My interpretation from it comes from the perspective of a Korean American, where it's like, South Korea as a country, like the government of South Korea, is technically younger than the established American Koreatowns.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And even then, the government of South Korea, there was provisional periods in which they were under like Western provisional governments, whether it be the United States or like a favorable political leader as prime minister that was very favorable to the United States. And this is like during Korean Reconstruction and post that period, and the whole democratization movement, and the Korean college communist movement that was shut down. So really, I think it kind of it's like a subtle like nod almost to like the pseudo cannibalistic nature of like South Korean existence almost. Like we have to eat each other to survive. Like we're forced to like be in these fucked up situations because like the playground that was set up was not necessarily the most stable one. And on top of that, Oldboy going from 1988 and then coming out in 2003, like post East Asian stock market crash, really just highlights the true instability in which like we settle ourselves. It's a castle built on sand, essentially. I don't know.
No, I it's really interesting. I like where you're going with all that. I think it's really interesting. And I do think that like, Korea is like a place maybe like defined by its grief. I'm not really
no, absolutely. Like
I mean, it's like certainly
I am
like
so removed from, the
like,
Korean War and Japanese occupation of South Korea, and then
but Korea is like a place built by the people that Koreans hate most. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the infrastructure, like the design, the organization of Korea was made in Japan's image, and it was like a brutal
Not even
occupation.
just that, but it was like a hybridization of like America, like
Right.
super like capitalist boom America, and then Japanese industrialization. It's like where Korea went from third world country to second to first world country within the span of like 10-15 years.
Really, really, really quick.
The amount of
And it has made Korean media be like particularly scathing, and like there's a reason why I think like all these really, really interesting like social critique kind of cinema comes out of Korea. And these are like big movies too. This isn't like stuff that's coming out like under the radar, or like some of the most famous, and like it's really interesting too, because I mean like movies like Parasite really couldn't even like exist. Like Parasite runs. You said this earlier. Parasite runs, because Oldboy walked, and I don't think it should be suggested on any level that it's not an amazing feat for a foreign film to win Best Picture is already incredible. The fact that it's from Korea is just really, really interesting. And
I think another like,
but why incest though? I do think that there's got to be like a more interesting like, why is that a recurring theme in Korean international cinema? Like, is it just the most shocking and appalling thing, and so they keep going there because Korean movies really like to be shocking and appalling? I really think it's there's
so
we're gonna find a thesis on this somewhere.
So it's for my like interpretation of my takeaway, it's like multifaceted, and one, it's the aspect of so in Korean culture, and I think this is like general like East Asian culture, how you present yourself and how you're perceived is incredibly important. Like the whole public persona is an incredibly huge factor into who you are as an individual and how you're recognized not just by your peers but also your family.
Right.
So, throughout the course of the story, we learned that Otezu, when he was younger, started a rumor, or told his friend, um, that Li Wujin was having an incestuous affair with his sister, Li Sua, and this is when they were in high school, and the rumor spread like wildfire, and it destroyed Li Sua's entire
Life.
public image, and she got a phantom pregnancy and killed herself.
Yeah, the phantom pregnancy is also really interesting. I mean, this whole movie's so fucking haunted.
I think the phantom pregnancy is Li Wujin in denial.
You think so?
Yeah, I think Li Wujin is in. If she was actually pregnant, I mean, not to say phantom pregnancies aren't real, okay? Because like that's actually
Does happen.
It does happen, and it is. Cause I think it's a medical phenomenon, but even if it was real, this is Li Wujin's out. Like this is him kind of like giving himself an out. Like it wasn't really his fault, right? But if the phantom pregnancy was fake, then
Well, so you're suggesting that maybe she really was pregnant?
Yeah.
Okay. And like thinking about it as a phantom pregnancy is like something to absolve himself and feel better.
Because like his entire way of looking back on it is, we were in love.
Right.
The only perspectives we see the story from are from Li Wujin, who considers himself to be the most objective narrator in that scenario.
Right.
Who I don't fucking trust this guy. For one, you should not trust anything Li Wujin says.
He's
and
crazy
then
fucking
other perspective is Otezu, and Otezu only saw a glimpse of it.
Right.
Really. And then,
he's basically peeping. He's peeping Tom.
Yeah. No. Absolutely.
There's like it's a voyeuristic experience. And it's a pretty big departure too from the manga, because in the manga he sees her being molested by her father.
Not just that, but the whole villain in the manga, he sees him playing an instrument, and then he understands the loneliness and isolation of him playing that instrument and being able to produce such a beautiful sound. That's why he hates him on top of that. And it's just so, I don't know. I think if you see something wild like that, keep it to yourself, and then maybe wait several years and bring it back up and change the names of the story a little bit just to be safe and certain. Because
otherwise you're going to end up in an Oldboy situation.
Otherwise, Li Wujin is your personal Li Wujin is going to
imprison you.
Spend the rest of their life
trying to
ruin a fortune just to execute their personal vengeance upon you.
I do think so. So in Japanese they call it tatemae,
Uh-huh.
which is like your mask, your like front
Uh-huh.
your front face. And so certainly tatemae is a big part of what's going on in the manga, right?
Yeah.
And I do think like the Korean equivalent is really important in the movie. But I mean, it is, I don't know. I mean, because it like, and then there's a beautiful element to it too. And they don't do this in the manga, but Li Wujin wants to take the thing that fucked up his life and make it exactly like his. Right. So he
not just that, but like,
he makes them in his image.
Not even just that, but Li Wujin is almost like he's doing Otezu a favor. Like, because one, he molded Otezu into the monster that he is right now, and he kind of gives into his own like hubris about like it can take anyone to get rich, but it takes a genius to actually make a monster or something like that. That's what he says. Because like Li Wujin's obsessively intelligent. Like this guy's playing 5D chess with kind of everyone.
But it's all really coherent too, and a lot of times with these like ass pulley kind of plot lines that exist in a lot of mangas and a lot of animes, where I've actually had it all figured out all along. Some like Code Geass kind of like Death Note-y kind of like a million steps ahead stuff can be really unbelievable. But this one, it's really just like 3 or 4 really important plot points. And it's coherent enough that you can it's believable. If the movie makes it feel believable.
Right. Because like, why wouldn't you go on this quest for revenge or try to find the answers to everything?
Right.
Because like Li Wujin lays it out for Otezu really, really plainly. It's like you're not going to torture me for one, because I'll kill myself before you do that.
I'll kill myself.
You could kill me, But would that be as satisfying as figuring out
knowing.
why?
Yeah.
As knowing why all this happened? And
The
that
movie
also gets you, the audience, invested even more because
Yeah.
you're like, yeah, no, I do want to know the truth of why all this happened too.
The movie it just also plays with this really interesting thing where it creates things that are in the image of other things without them truly being that thing. So like Odesu is created perfectly in the image of a hero.
Yeah.
Without any of the virtuous qualities of an actual hero.
He's an animal.
He thinks of himself as one. But at the same time, you know, he like does all this like sick badass stuff. Like the first thing he does when he gets out of jail is pick a fight with a bunch of like street thugs.
Well, he steals a cigarette right out of one of
Right
their...
out of their mouth and just like takes a drag of it. By the way, he's wearing women's sunglasses that he stole from someone in an elevator.
Oh my god, the elevator scene is hilarious because like
that.
he's kind of freaking out from the elevator movie
Right.
because he hasn't been in an elevator since 1988. And then he's like on the wall like this, and he's just like kind of bug eye looking at her. And then the next scene, he's just walking out of the building, and you can see behind him.
Yeah.
This is so genius. Like
it's such good framing because the frame has her complaining to a security guard that he
On,
stole
like, the
the
left
sunglasses,
side.
and then there's a car on the right side. He's wearing the sunglasses,
and he's centered. So he breaks the essentially breaks it up into thirds, which is like, okay, you know,
yeah, it's a triptych.
Yeah.
It's like a perfect triptych for sure. But he's like so proud of himself. He's like, I'm the sickest person who's ever lived. Like, I'm out, bitch. And then the guy who wanted to kill himself earlier falls on the car.
and crushes the car.
Well, and he's like, has such a crazy savage attitude that he never really loses. Like when they're on the roof in the first place, the guy's like, he's like, I'm gonna tell you my story, and he tells him his whole story. The other guy's like, well, I'm gonna tell you my story, and he's like, yeah, whatever, and just walks away. And then 5 minutes later, you see that the guy's killed himself.
It's like,
and
oh, you thought we were having turns?
I know. And the movie treats it like a punchline. The movie treats it like a joke. The guy kills himself. And the guy's like, and then Odesu's like, I'm so fucking badass.
This movie is so funny sometimes.
It really is. It's so brutal. Like the movie is like, you know what I mean? When the guy fucking kills himself. And then, you know, he's wearing women's sunglasses. He goes, picks a fight with a bunch of street thugs, and he wants to see, like, because he's been training, like, in his dojo by himself.
10 years
of punching a wall can actually turn you into a badass.
And then he kicks their ass.
Yeah, and then he kicks the shit out of these guys.
And then in his internal monologue, he's like, turns out it does.
Turns out you can do it. And how self-satisfied he is with those things is so funny because that level of hubris that like slams back every time. It's just made even more and more clear that this person exercises no control over their reality. Like it is a completely, like everything he does is a futile gesture.
He's a bird in the hand of a fowler.
Yeah.
He's gonna keep returning to the cage.
Yeah.
The cage just gets bigger. He's still stuck in it though.
Well, and he's turned him into this like insane bird, right?
Yeah.
Like this bird that can do all this crazy shit now.
Yeah. He's great. Like how Lee just says, it takes a genius to make a monster.
Yeah.
And you're like, God damn, man. Did anyone really deserve? Okay, I guess this is kind of an ultimate question. Do you think anyone deserved this?
No one deserves any. This is the craziest thing anyone's. You know, this is like ridiculous. This is like ridiculous.
Absolutely insane.
Everything that Lee Woo-jin does is ridiculous.
Lee Woo-jin is fucking insane. He's such a crazy guy. Who?
I do think, I mean, like the performance though is really incredible.
You buy it.
Yeah, and he's like
I think so. This is one of my favorite parts, but I don't know if you picked up on this. But so the way Lee Woo-jin talks to Otesu is very casual.
Yes.
Like he doesn't use formal language at all.
Okay, yeah, I would never have picked that up.
Yeah,
I don't know Korean enough to even know
the way he like speaks to Otesu is almost like they're really old friends.
Oh, okay.
Like they've known each other forever.
Right.
Like they could just talk to each other.
Yeah, you could do that in Japanese too, but
like,
I wouldn't have noticed in Korean.
It's very casual in the way he speaks to him. It's like, hey, bro, don't you know like who I am? It's like, oh, who am I? I was like, oh.
Formality is also such an interesting part of languages that have a formal and informal way of speaking.
Yeah.
And it creates this interesting distance between characters, but then also can like melt it away too.
Yeah,
right?
because Mr. Park speaks to Lee Woo-jin formally.
Yeah, right. Because it's a business transaction.
In formal language.
Yeah.
Lee Woo-jin speaks to him coldly.
Right.
There is no casualness in that conversation. There is no comfort in that conversation. It's cold. It's ice cold. He just tells him how it is, how much it's gonna be, and what he's gonna do, and why, and that he's just gonna do it.
Right. And just, so Lee Woo-jin, part of his shenanigans know no bounds. At one point, he pays the guy who is imprisoned, Odesu, to cut off his own hand.
Yeah. And that ties back into like my observations of the undercurrent of anti-capitalism going on, where it's like Mr. Park is essentially a class traitor.
Yeah.
He's
really crazy though. I mean, he's willing to do crazy stuff. I mean, like, oh my god, the fucking the hammer and the teeth.
Oh my god!
So Odesu,
he's duct taped like that on the bed, and then like the tape is like like that on his mouth.
Yeah. It's covered so well, and I don't know how they do that shot where they make the blood squirt out and stuff like that. But so, anyways, Odesu he marches his way back in. He finds out where the prison was, where he's been kept. He marches his way back in, and then he meets the guy who kept him there, and he slowly rips all of his teeth out with the other side of a hammer.
So after being let go of the prison, and the guy committing suicide, and him just walking around with women's sunglasses, he eventually makes his way to this just a random restaurant, and a homeless guy approaches him, says he works for Lee Woo-jin, says he doesn't really know anything else, gives him a cell phone, I think an address and some money, and that's it, and tells him to go to this and this place, where he meets Mido, who's played by Kang Hae-jung. I think that's her name.
The cutest person who's ever lived.
She's so charming.
Really charming and spunky and interesting.
Who is known, she's famous for being like a female sushi chef, because her hands are like the temperature that is like optimal for being
a sushi
working
chef.
With sushi.
I can't remember if it was cold or warm, but
I can't either.
She has the right hands for making.
She has
sushi.
The opposite temperature hands of what is expected to be a woman or whatever.
Right.
So that makes her great. But if you recall earlier, when Otesu is in his little one-bedroom apartment or whatever, or his studio prison, on the TV, there's this news report about her. So that's what kind of also leads me to believe that all of this is the TV itself is also part of his programming.
That's true. There's a news report. There's a news story about her being a great female sushi chef.
Yeah.
Right, he knows about her already and comes in and talks to her about it. And that specifically, that happens kind of a lot too. I mean, like specifically, whatever channel he's on is the one that tells him about his wife has been murdered, right? Because Lee Woo-jin has murdered his wife like while he's been imprisoned.
He sees people working out. He works out.
Yeah. Like it's all like weird programming, and it's also funny too because people we don't think about this as much, but in like the 20th century, like during the era of like cable and like actual television and like timed viewing rather than like timeless viewing, people had this idea about, especially like, and I'm sure this was prevalent in enough cultures where television was popular enough that it programmed you.
Yeah.
Right. That's like the Gen X like theme, right?
Not even just that, but like historically speaking, Lenin, like from like the USSR, believed
Vladimir Lenin.
Yeah, Vladimir Lenin believed that cinema and movies or anything in the visual medium could be used as an important tool of education.
Mm-hmm.
So when it came to the United States, a lot of people grabbed onto that and were like, "Oh, the USSR is trying to brainwash you, blah 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 blah, through movies, blah 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 blah, stuff like that."
That's funny.
And then that slowly evolves, snowballs into television is rotting your brain. Television is going to manipulate you into believing these things, blah, 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 blah. Go to today's day and age, and it's social media is rotting your brain. Social media is going to make you think these certain things, blah, blah, blah. And I'm not saying that isn't the case, because obviously, and
I do think that you could like the values and attitudes of any particular time are almost always pretty uniquely reflected in whatever the subject matter is. I mean,
Socrates hated writing. Like that's the known fact. Socrates thought books would be the end of true knowledge.
Yeah, that's right. That's true. And so that's why everything we know about Socrates we learn from Plato.
Exactly.
That's true. Because Plato was like, I'm gonna write this shit down.
I don't know. Human memory is fallible.
Yeah, like I'm gonna write some of this down. But you do wonder. That's why that's the problem with Socrates, right? The infinite problem with Socrates is you never know if what you're
was really
dealing
Socrates.
With, right? or what is a misremembered version of him that Plato had in his mind. So who knows? But I will say that the idea that you're being programmed by your television, like this movie goes like fucking ham with it, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But he meets Mito, and Mito, as you know, anyone who's seen this movie knows, is his daughter. And so
they have sex.
Yes, and they fall in love, right? Like Lee Woo-jin makes them a perfect copy of him and his sister.
Yeah,
creates them in his image.
Yeah, because he wants to create he wants Otesu to understand him.
Yes, exactly.
Truly understand, which is kind of an inverse
of what's going on in the
manga. Because the manga is like, he doesn't want to be understood.
Yeah, being understood is too intimate.
Yeah, whereas in Lee Woo-jin's case, it's like, I want you to know my pain.
And there's like some weird Frankenstein shit about this movie.
No, absolutely.
Because he creates this thing in his image. It's weird. It's weird.
Well, I mean, like, okay, so I kind of wrote down some of the hardest lines I thought Lee Woo-jin said in this movie.
Bro, I want to hear some of the hard lines.
So it's like when Otesu asks him, "Who the hell are you?" Then Lee Woo-jin says, "Me? I'm sort of a scholar. My major is you, a scholar studying Otesu. I'm an expert in Otesu." And he says it very casually, as if this is just something that, like.
Does he say that while he's in his like weird changing room? Where does he say that? Do you remember?
I think he says that like when he's being threatened by.
And he's like, I'll turn my own heart off.
Yeah, it's like, who the hell are you even? Blah, blah,
yeah,
blah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, this guy's that's terrifying. Can you imagine someone?
I will say the depictions of him. So the movie is really, really dramatic, and it creates these really, really like kind of beautiful like silhouettes and like vignettes of these characters, and it simultaneously creates beautiful images of Otesu and Lee Woo-jin. Lee Woo-jin has like this really beautiful scene where he's like doing yoga. And he's like crying, and there's sequences. He
meditates. Yeah. He has a beautiful like space that he lives in. It's very zen. There's feng shui going on.
Although I will say one thing was really interesting. So I saw this in theaters very recently at Grauman's, and they've re-released it. They've done like a remaster. It was very beautiful. But in the opening, instead of having credits, they have an interview with Park Chan-wook and who's that asshole who made Drive? Nicholas Winding Refn. And Refn asks him if there's anything you regretted about making this movie, what might it be? And his deepest regret, the one thing he could think of that he wished they could do but they didn't have the resources to, was to have a single lane lap pool in that space where he would swim in. And then they couldn't do it, or they couldn't pull it off, and I think that him doing yoga is a replacement shot for that.
I think what it is they just couldn't afford it.
Right.
They just like didn't have the money.
They just didn't have the budget for it. Right.
Which I think would have been an insane shot, and just hammered in more the wealth gap.
Right. Well, and specifically the image he wanted was him sitting in this pool over the city.
Lee Woo-jin has a very yuppie kind of vibe going, like,
yeah, it's
Patrick
weird.
Bateman.
Yeah, it's very totally.
Yeah, like yuppie as like morning routine type stuff.
Yeah.
You look at his closet and it's all the same suits almost.
I know, but he's so tormented.
Yeah,
right. And he's got the best, like, this horribly like anguished crying face. But it reminds me a little bit of the crying faces from. There's a lot of things about this movie that reminds me of Ichi the Killer, but the crying faces, Ichi's crying faces in Ichi the Killer. There's a bunch of things in this movie that remind me of Ichi the Killer,
but like I think that's also another juxtaposition where it's like, you were saying that Otesu doesn't really fit the characteristics of a hero necessarily, or live up to the attributes of a hero at all.
He has almost no virtuous qualities.
Lee Woo-jin has virtues to him. He's a very virtuous person. Are his virtues a justification of his actions? No. Are his virtues necessarily good? No, not necessarily. But not just that, but visually speaking, he's handsome, he's well put together, he's well dressed.
He's the civilized person. Like, exactly. One of them is a beast and one of them is a civilized person.
Who's really the monster in that case?
It's really interesting, though, because Lee Woo-jin, though, is, he's civilized.
But he's also a monster.
Obviously. But he is deeply principled, right? He believes strongly in everything that he's doing.
Right. At the end of the day, his convictions are that of love.
Right.
That's what he argues about. Right. That he did this because
of how much he loved his sister.
Yeah. That his sister was his first love.
His only love, right?
Because like he didn't.
He never moves on.
He never moves on. He doesn't get that catharsis. He doesn't go to therapy. Like,
I will say that this movie is like the most insane version of that meme. That men would rather blank than go to therapy. Men would rather imprison a guy for 15 years.
Funny you say that.
And learn everything he can about that person, and then systematically destroy every possibility for like them having a normal life, and kills their wife and grooms their daughter, then go to therapy.
So Otesu has a line. Oh, excuse me. Otesu has a line where he goes, "Revenge is good for your health, but pain will find you again." And I think he says that to Mido, and then he says that again later, because that's like a kind of like semi-recurring theme of the film. Because essentially, Lee Woo-jin is just ignoring his pain. Like his singular goal of revenge is not helping him with his pain at all. That's kind of why also he kills himself after he gets his revenge,
right?
Because he doesn't have a purpose anymore. His purpose was fulfilled,
right?
And sure, Otesu is right to an extent. Revenge is kind of good for your health. Got him into shape. It got Lee Woo-jin wealthy, focused, driven, also in shape. Relatively,
they're both really in really good shape, which is a funny thing.
Yeah,
revenge. It's a funny thing they have in similarity is like,
and their health is
dedication.
Fine, relatively speaking.
Yeah,
they're in good health. But the pain is there. They can't escape it. It will always be there.
They're definitely both like they're healthy on the outside and really, really sick on the inside.
Oh, absolutely. It's the pain that it's illnesses you can't see. Stuff.
And like the music in this movie is so good, and each of like the different themes and each of the different like musical motifs are just really, really, really powerful and touching, and you feel all the things you need to feel when you need to feel them. Like so much of the like I think that this movie you said you could watch this movie without sound, and you could, but I actually would be more interesting if you just watched it without dialogue, because
that would be insane, because there's some really crazy musical cues. One of my favorite is like when Otesu like passes out on the street, and then like this random stranger in a hoodie helps him up. It's like, "Hey, let me grab you a cab," blah blah blah, and he shoves him into a cab, and he's like, "I'll see you later, Otesu." And
he's like, "Wait, who the fuck are you?" It's Lee Woo-jin. Yeah,
it's Lee Woo-jin. And there's like this whole musical cue, and then it drives off, and all you can see is like he's turning like through the rear windshield of the car, trying to figure out who this guy is. Yeah, it's so good. This movie's perfect. There's technically one goof.
Oh yeah, tell me what the goof is. I thought it was
so funny. The one goof is when Mido and Otesu are Googling
okay, by the way, so they find his friend from the one who saw him get kidnapped, or was there when he got kidnapped way back when, and was his friend in high school.
Yeah.
And they meet up with him, and he owns an internet cafe, which is perfectly period, by the way.
It's perfectly period now too. It's still very relevant. If anything, they just got bigger.
Yeah, people just sleep with them now.
They just got more amenities. Oh, they serve food now. They got beds. They got private rooms, toilets, showers.
Yeah, people live at them now.
Like, it's cheaper than rent sometimes. It's cheaper than living in getting a hotel for the night sometimes.
But anyway, so
free unlimited internet for as long as you're there.
Unlimited internet. But they search for they're trying to figure out how he knows this person.
Like, how are they connected?
How are they connected? And he realizes, because at some point I think he says Oldboy to him, or he calls him an Oldboy, right?
Yeah.
Or does he say something about Evergreen? I can't remember. It's something about Evergreen.
One is the Bible phrase or the Bible quote where it's like, the bird in the fowler's hand, set yourself free.
Right. And they went to Catholic school.
Because they went to Catholic school, but also the nickname of their group was the Oldboys, the Evergreen Oldboys.
Yeah, Evergreen Oldboys.
So they Google Evergreen, but when they Google Evergreen on the computer, it's already highlighted in purple.
Which means someone's already clicked on it.
Someone's already clicked that link on a Google search.
Yeah.
When they're supposed to be Googling it for the first time.
Right. What a horrible gaffe. I can't believe they missed that.
The movie is ruined now.
What a horrible movie. What a horrible night for a curse.
But, I think that's easy. There's a really easy way to write that off like as a plot hole is Lee Woo-jin Googled it. Maybe I think if it's Googled at the internet cafe, then maybe Lee Woo-jin Googled it. Because also Lee Woo-jin is the person that Mido is talking to in the chat rooms.
Right.
He's Evergreen,
Right.
which is another hint to the school.
Right.
And honestly, would you say the mystery is the point? Because I don't think the mystery is necessarily the point.
Mystery kind of doesn't really matter, and that's like one of the craziest things about this is this movie is a movie where everybody talks about the plot twist. But once you know the plot twist, the movie isn't really any less satisfying to watch. And I think that's an interesting thing to think about, thing to wonder about, what it is exactly that makes it so rewatchable. But I do think that a lot of that has to do with pace. A lot of it has to do with like the, like every sequence is self-evident in its value, like aesthetically, and for the story. That like at no point are you ever really burning out on exposition or on like there's a segment where a gang of thugs who they work at the prison, they capture Mito, and they're gonna like torture her and they're gonna torture him, and it feels like, oh wow, this is like another big payoff sequence. But even in that
like
sequence,
something's gonna
right, something's gonna pop. But even in that sequence, they're setting up. I talked earlier about Lee Woo-jin having the guy's hand cut off. Like even sequences like that feel like a big something that's been built to is still building towards other sequences. There's this kind of like interweaving like webbed way in which every single sequence is like essential to every other, and it's like a perfect like Jenga tower.
Also, it just reasserts itself that Lee Woo-jin is the ultimate threat, or like the big bad. He's the apex predator of this scenario. These guys that kept him in prison for 15 years are torturing Mito, or they threaten they're going to torture Mito and do other horrible things to her. They cower in fear of Lee Woo-jin.
But they also aren't. It's funny because this guy has his teeth ripped out by him, and even then they aren't particularly personally interested in him.
Yeah.
Like Lee Woo-jin is motivated deeply by personal feelings,
whereas
and these guys are just by money.
And again, the undercurrent of anti-capitalism that I.
But it's so interesting that Lee Woo-jin is so like he's like the pettiest character written in fiction.
Oh, absolutely! Like this guy's.
I don't know. Maybe somewhere down the road, I'm be like, you know what, Lee Woo-jin is nothing compared to so and so. But he's definitely like the pettiest character we've talked about so far. I don't know.
I would argue Lee Woo-jin is not just the pettiest, but like the most evil, because like he blames Old Hesu for him being the way he is now.
Yeah.
He doesn't take responsibility of him.
Yeah, he has zero accountability for sure.
He's like, oh, do you know why I hate you, or do you know why I did this to you? It's not just because you started the rumor and my sister killed herself, and like I lost my love. It's because the person who I was, the person who I could have been, died that day too because of you. And
so I don't know if we covered this, but Lee Woo-jin's sister, whether she's pregnant or not, she kills herself. It's a very actually interesting and weird sequence.
It's a very beautiful shot.
It's beautiful sequence,
because
but
she's
really
on like
weird.
they're at a dam, and she's hanging off the ledge, and this is a young Lee Woo-jin who's like desperately holding on to her, right? And eventually she just like lets go, and he slips, and his hand or his grip slips, and she falls and she dies. So I've
always thought the sequence was so weird because I've always thought it feels weird, like it just like had they gone there with her planning to do that?
Yeah,
had they agreed on her doing this?
I don't think
he backed out at the end. I'm not really sure.
I think that was just all her,
and she brought him there and then killed herself in front of him. I don't know. It's a very interesting sequence.
But also, again, it could be just don't trust Lee Woo-jin's side of the story.
Yeah,
he's an unreliable narrator.
That I've thought about that too. I've always I wondered if like maybe he killed her.
I don't think Lee Woo-jin killed her.
Maybe he felt like he had to. I don't know.
It may not even be that he was presently there for her suicide, like
right, and how he imagines it that way
because he blames himself for not being able to protect her necessarily. Because also, after Lee Woo-jin gets his revenge against Oh Tae-soo in the elevator, he gets the visions back to that scene again.
Right.
But now he's an adult, right? And now he's an adult standing where he was when he was younger, and he's no longer holding his sister's hand.
Yeah.
There's nothing really there for him to hold on to anymore. Like literally, there's nothing for him to hold on to anymore.
Yeah, and then he just kills himself.
Yeah, because he has nothing left to live for.
Like, just the only thing he had left was just torturing this person.
Because his entire identity at that point was rooted in who he was when he was a teenager.
Yeah.
He never grew up, really.
No.
He was just a scared child in a grown man's body exacting his personal petty revenge.
Yeah, like the weirdest, most pettiest revenge scheme of all time. But
I'm gonna kidnap this one guy, groom his child, brainwash both of them so that way they have an incestuous
so they have an incestuous relationship like mine.
And then I'm gonna put him into an ultimatum position where he has to either confront himself in front of me, or I reveal all of this to his girlfriend. Its stakes are not super high. It's very personal stakes.
It is intense, though. It's like an intense level of like personal scrutiny.
I think the interesting part about it is that, the victim in this scenario is not necessarily Otesu, it's Mido.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Whereas like Lee Woo-jin is also trying to show that Otesu, the victim in this scenario, was not necessarily Lee Woo-jin, it was his sister.
Right.
Because
yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes sense. And I also think that he's like intended it that way too, because I think that he knows that he instinctively knows that Odesu will care more about the life of his daughter than he will of himself.
Yeah.
He was like already like a person who like lives kind of with like a certain level of reckless abandon. It's even demonstrated in like the very opening shots in the police station that maybe the only thing he really sees as like a light in his life is his daughter, and everything else is kind of a joke or like unimportant.
And then the one thing that he truly saw as pure is essentially corrupted by him.
Yeah.
He is the reason that it's messed up. And he begs, is like, do not let my sins be extracted upon my daughter, please. I'll do anything. Like,
well, that's like what Lee Woo-jin really wanted, right? That's why he can really kill himself.
Yeah.
Because Odesu is literally groveling.
He got the satisfaction of breaking him.
He totally breaks him. He completely breaks him. And then he
built him to be his optimal self, the monster that he envisioned him to be, and he broke him. Still beat him. And
then they take one of the most iconic sequences from Each of the Killer, and he cuts his own tongue out.
Yep, using scissors instead of a
katana.
But
then now he can't tell her.
Yeah.
Right.
Which leads us to the end, where I think we have a slight disagreement, where he goes to the hypnotist lady in the forest.
Right.
And then
he meets the same woman. I believe it's the same hypnotist who's been hypnotizing him.
Yep,
and he approaches her to hypnotize him again.
To forget. Right. And what she tells him is that two people are going to walk away from here.
Yeah.
One of them was going to be Otesu, and he won't remember anything that happened. He will go return to his blissful ignorance, be happy.
Right.
But the other person is going to be the monster, and the monster is going to remember this. The monster is going to be cursed with this. That's just how it's going to be. And, after that hypnotism happens, we see Otesu walking away in the snow, and he turns around, and there's footsteps going in the opposite direction of where he was standing. And eventually he reconvenes with Mido, and she says she loves him, and he kind of cracks this like really messed up smile.
Yeah.
Which
he still doesn't have a tongue, by the way.
Yeah, still doesn't have a tongue. He's pretty much muted.
I have no mouth and I must scream.
I think the person that walks away is not Otesu. It's the monster. We're left with the monster. The tracks in the snow are, probably literally the hypnotist ladies, but like narratively Otesu.
I see where you're coming from, but I don't agree, because I don't like none of these characters have personal grievances against Otesu. Like, the only person who cares about Otesu on an individual level is Lee Woo-jin, and I think that she does exactly what he asks her to do, which is to make him forget. And he decides, and that's what makes it so valuable, right? He can either stop having this relationship with her,
yeah,
or he can choose to, and he chooses. There's like a kind of like a fucked up duality here where he can choose to either know about it. I mean, there's kind of like a couple different ways you go, but the kind of the two most obvious solutions are either know about it and don't do it anymore, or don't know about it and continue the relationship as they had it. And he chooses to continue the relationship as they had it, where they continue as lovers instead of as father and daughter.
I think honestly that he just remembers that he's forever cursed with knowledge. Once you learn something, you can't unlearn it, really. That his desperate attempt at separating the monster and Otesu has just stripped away what little humanity of Otesu was still left inside of him.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially, it's just the monster now.
I wonder which of those is like a more popular reading. I wonder like which one people prescribe to more. I will say that. So I will say though that this is exactly where the YouTube comments start to come in too, where like a lot of people are arguing about this element. Like the plot twist seems to be the most divisive part about the movie, which is the reveal that Mito is his daughter.
I think that's just because people are hung up on the incest part.
Definitely.
Which is like,
definitely. And this is years before Game of Thrones.
I'm not defending incest here at all. Okay, it's just like, yeah, it's shocking, and it's supposed to be that way. It's intentionally
shocking. It's an exploit movie.
Absolutely.
It has like a bunch of exploit qualities, and that's part of what makes it like a
the voyeuristic nature of certain scenes in the filmmaking, the whole like.
But it's such a sincere movie. It's so Each of the Killer is an exploit movie that's like absurd and like silly and like wacky and insane and like people jizzing in potted plants. Yeah, it's maximalist. And this is some of the same tendencies, some of the same energy, but with like all this emotional like ethos and pathos.
Yeah,
like it's like real people. Each of the Killer.
There's a greater weight to it all.
Yeah.
Each of the Killer is kind of
like a bunch of cartoon characters. Like
Kamen Rider.
Yeah, exactly.
It's Kamen Rider.
Yeah.
Oldboy is deconstruction, almost deconstructive cinema.
Yeah, but it's like really intimate. It's like really hard boiled, and the consequences of each of these actions has all these like like when Kakihara cuts his tongue out, he doesn't even stop talking.
Yeah, and then he's like, don't worry, the human body is great at regenerating. And then like the next scene is like his tongue is fine.
Yeah,
he's talking like normal. And you're like, okay, what was the whole point of that? Anyways, you just cut your tongue off just to cut your tongue off.
Because they knew how sick it was.
Because it's sick.
Yeah, because it's sick.
Whereas in like Oldboy, everything is a consequence.
Yeah, everything is all about consequences.
Like Otesu's body is like messed up from like all the fights he gets in. There's
no, it's true. It's also, and like they're really careful to show the like scars on his knuckles,
his calloused knuckles, his broken hands, his like cuts, his bruises, his.
He's like constantly bleeding out of his head too.
Yeah, because people keep smacking him in the head with different kind of objects, like glass bottles, sticks,
the underside of a knife.
Yeah,
when he's trying to sexually assault his own daughter
for the first time. God, that's not a fucking sentence I thought it had to. But
no, it's so interesting. So the comments start to get really spicy here too. So I think a lot of people really struggle with with incest as a theme, especially in the ways in which in this movie it's depicted as like genuine intimacy too. Like the movie isn't as interested in condemning Lee Woo-jin and his sister's romance or Mito and her father's romance as much as it is exploring the ways in which it's incompatible with the values of the culture they live in.
Yeah, but I would also argue it's also just more of what you put into it as well. Like the movie necessarily doesn't necessarily have to explicitly say anything because you as a person inherently know some of these things are wrong.
Definitely. No, that's the thing too, though. That's the thing, though. I would actually even take it a step further than that. And so one of the things that I've seen, and this is like the moralistic thing, is that I think people come into this movie with like a highly Hollywoodized idea about how movies and cinema works. Where's this idea that the message and the movie are you can't separate them, right? The message and the value, the morals of the storytelling,
the theme and its ethics and stuff like
storytelling is a moral instrument. That's the way that people see cinema, having been conditioned that way through Hollywood storytelling. But this movie doesn't see itself as a moral instrument. It doesn't have some great theme or some great
Well, I say it has
moral.
like a theme, but it's not like it's not trying to teach you.
It does. It has themes, but what I
Right.
mean is, it does. There isn't like a moral of the story, right?
Right.
It's not like a moralistic instrument. But when people come into it from
Expecting moralistic,
they come up with all kinds of crazy ideas for what they
conclusions.
think it is.
Yeah.
And so I've seen comments where like, well, the movie, it was about how blah blah blah, and it's like, what the fuck are you talking about? So like I honestly should have written down some of the examples, but it was really funny because I was seeing people literally say, well, the moral of the story is blah 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 blah, and that was like their legitimate response to this film. But I don't think that this film is particularly interested in having a moral of the story, right?
Because every moral justification is inherently wrong. Like Lee Woo-jin has this insanely. This is like the most famous line he has. It says, "Remember this: be it a rock or a grain of sand, in water they sink the same," which is technically true, yes, but that's also like the pettiest fucking shit ever. Are you telling me that if I dropped a boulder in a pond, right, that it would have the same weight and same effect as me dropping a singular grain of sand into that same pond?
Do you think that's one of his justifications for like how crazy he is being?
Yeah, absolutely. Like,
Yeah.
he's essentially what he's saying to Old Jesus is like, it didn't matter how you wronged me. It was the fact that you did wrong me.
That's true, actually, because also it's funny because like he like what he did, right, was like almost like a sentence fragment,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
He mentions slightly offhand to his friend, the same one that he murders, the guy who owns the.
Like, dude, I just saw something weird. And he's like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
What do you see? And he's like, oh, dude, I just saw this
guy and his sister.
making out.
Yeah.
I think. And he's
Yeah.
like, I didn't even get a good look.
And then domino effect, right?
Right. Really, wouldn't
It's also funny because he could have taken this out on any one person in the chain of that
group of girls that bullied her or whatever,
Right.
or like the Lee Woo-jin or Old Jesus' best friend.
but he needed a target, and he picks
picked
this guy.
Old Jesus,
Yeah, picks like that.
which is it's rather interesting.
it's
At the
really
end of the
interesting.
day,
It
why
really is.
specifically Old Jesus? Is it just because he bore witness?
Yeah, or witness. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, yeah,
Is being witness a crime?
yeah.
Is Old Jesus ultimately guilty of being witness?
Being in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah. Is his grand sin just bearing witness to something that he shouldn't have necessarily seen?
Yeah.
Regardless of how wrong it was.
Yeah. But so I can't help but like keep coming back to this way in which Hollywood cinema and just cinema of the West in general, I think, especially big movie, big industry cinema, and we live in like highly like politicized times, and we live in a time in which like people are constantly concerned about like conveying the right message or the kind of message that like the type of messaging determines the success of like a film as a product.
I think what
I think is interesting though is and I was home in Detroit for my sister's wedding, and I always watch Turner Classic Movies when I'm home. Big fan of I've like half the things I've learned about movies I've learned from just watching that channel. And I watched Streetcar Named Desire. And I haven't seen A Streetcar Named Desire. I've seen a lot of old movies, but I had never seen A Streetcar Named Desire.
I really like that movie.
It's a very, very good movie. And not only does it have one of the greatest titles of any movie ever, of course, it came from the incredible play that it's based on. But the movie itself has a really, really it doesn't really have. It's really interesting. Like, this was a wildly successful movie.
Yep.
It's for many people it like marks like this watershed moment in like the history of like Hollywood cinema and Hollywood, like the style of acting. Marlon Brando's performance in that movie, like for many people, is like represents a dramatic shift from old Hollywood, golden age Hollywood acting and the acting.
Not just that, but before The Godfather, that was considered his like best performance.
Well, and it was his breakout role, I think.
Yeah.
It was a career making role for him. But the movie doesn't see itself as a moral instrument.
No, absolutely not. It's just interested in telling you the story.
And there are themes, right? Like as we talked about earlier, there are themes, and I think that maybe you could read morals in certain, but it's not in this black and white kind of way.
Like Rebel Without a Cause.
Sure.
Like so James Dean is essentially this kind of like Otesu to an extent, where he's kind of just this wild kid.
Yeah.
Really, just doing whatever, and there are themes.
And also, they open similarly, by the way, because James Dean's really drunk at the beginning, and he's at the police station. He's drunk at the police station.
Yeah. But yeah, it's just this. I don't know.
I think it's interesting that Hollywood didn't used to overly concern itself with moralizing the way that it does now, and watching it transform into a system in which it has to constantly be like hand and wrist wringing over like whether or not it's telling the right moralistic kind of story.
Independence Day. We will not go quietly into the night.
But there's like every movie now has to like be trying to like teach me a lesson about like some sort of moralistic kind of world viewpoint. But it is interesting that at one point in time that was not necessarily the inherent goal of even Hollywood products. And so watching a movie like Oldboy and like remembering how movies can be and how they can like, it's really interesting because like Oldboy I don't think is a movie that like not just anyone could enjoy. You know, I think that like the fact that your grandparents have seen it.
I mean, they're just Korean.
I'm just saying, though, that I think that I think that people, when you make movies or stories that are complicated, the audience races to the expectations of the media that you've created for them.
Yeah, I just think it's like don't sell your audience short. The audience isn't stupid.
Yeah.
The audience is not stupid.
Totally.
They can handle complex themes and stuff like this. The whole point of Oldboy is to converse about Oldboy. If your movie is just one and done, and don't want to talk about it anymore, you made a boring movie.
Yeah. Well, I do think though that so in these comments that I'm talking about online, you know, you see people being like, "Well, moral of the story is blah blah blah." Then you also quickly, rapidly see people being like, "Moral that this movie doesn't have a fucking moral of the story." And so I think that like it's a good kind of dialogue, and I think that if we could. It's a form of storytelling that I wish that we could return to at a big scale, you know, and not just like indie movies never really lost it, but big movies should be able to like A Streetcar Named Desire. A big movie should be able to expect its audience to raise to the intellectual like an emotional complexity of its storytelling, and Oldboy really really does that in an incredible way.
I think. Yeah, I mean, there's just like really hard hitting lines in there that like.
Was there another one we haven't
like
read?
Kind of wax or wane philosophically on like what is essentially being hammered in. Is one that Otesu says is laugh and the world laughs with you. Weep and you weep alone.
You weep alone. I think that's written on the poster.
It's on the poster. Yeah, it's on his.
There's a poster in Odesu's room,
and
where he's been held captive, and it's written on the
wall.
All
he has to look at essentially for how long he lasts before he decides to start journaling or whatever. And it's such an
jerking off to very non-sexual television.
Yoga, like Pilates.
I think it's like a concert. I think it's like a music.
Oh, is it? Yeah. It's probably like an.
I think it's like women. Exactly.
Idol group or something.
Yeah, right. But it's very not sexy, and he doesn't seem happy to do it. He seems very uncomfortable.
It seems ashamed almost. Yeah. Like he broke.
He's like been reduced to that.
Yeah, like a part of him broke while doing that almost. But
yeah. The other comment thread that I thought was interesting on YouTube was people arguing about whether or not the better way to have written the plot twist. I guess there's two plot twists. The other incest theme, the one with Lee Woo-jin, was people suggesting that it would have been more impactful if Lee Woo-jin and his sister had only been perceived to have been in a incestuous relationship, because then his sense of injustice would be greater. Right.
I think that's just a genuine interpretation or reading that you can just make of the film, because again, I don't think there's any really super reliable or objectively reliable narrator in this story, because
but he's not denying it either.
Yeah, but Lee Woo-jin's also not mentally stable.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But to suggest that both Lee Woo-jin and Odesu are imagining the incestuous relationship between Lee Woo-jin and his
that they're
daughter.
imagining it. Odesu is trying to remember something that happened almost like 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Or over 30 years ago.
Which, by the way, the guy who plays Lee Woo-jin does not look old enough for any of.
I think that's also supposed to be like, the money part.
Oh, okay.
He's wealthier. He
His
looks healthier.
is he's doing like the
Patrick Bateman.
Yeah, exactly.
The what's it called? This moisturizer mask or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe. It's very very likely.
I do 1,000 push-ups and crunches every day. Yeah.
So I put a cold press mask. My face is a little puffy.
Yeah. But yeah, no. So people, here's my response to that comment, by the way.
Uh-huh.
So people on the internet are like, well, actually, it'd be cooler if. And what's really funny too is that the immediate response to the next comment was someone being like, "Oh, you're like way smarter than the writers of this movie," which just made me so mad. Made me so mad. They're like, "Oh, fuck you." But what I think if it's only perceived that they're having an incestuous relationship, it takes away the actual intimacy. Because so here's the thing: he's not just mad that he's gotten caught or that his reputation has been ruined, or his sister's reputation, I suppose, mostly.
Yeah.
It's that he's lost his sister and that he was really in love with her.
Yeah.
And that he perceives their relationship as being true love. And that is what is lost if you take away the actual incest component.
Not even just that, but who's to say that was the first time or the 20th time or something like that? It was only the time that
they got caught. Yeah.
Saw.
Yeah.
It could have just been the first time. Could have been a mistake that they grew out of. Literally, Lee Woo-jin's motivations is that I wasn't allowed to grow into the person that I could have become because of the rumor that you started, because my love was taken from me. I couldn't grow up, essentially.
Yeah.
Which I think he's slightly justified, but also at the same time it's very petty, which is perfect for him, which makes him such a compelling villain.
When his self-destructiveness is just so intense too. He does everything that he does at the sacrifice of ever having anything resembling a real life.
He's the embodiment of Confucius ideals in Korean culture of practicing one thing 1,000 times to master it instead of practicing 1,000 things one time. He became a master of otesu.
Yeah.
He is an expert of otesu.
Mm-hmm.
He knows how this guy ticks. That's all he cares about is getting revenge on otesu.
Yeah.
Like, by all standards of measurement, Lee Woo-jin is the perfect Korean man.
Oh my God. All right, hot take, guys.
Like, he's physically fit, he's relatively attractive, he's wealthy.
Wildly successful.
Yeah.
From the right kind of family.
Right?
Right.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. That's really interesting, actually. He is like kind of a ideal Korean male.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Like class, elegance, like distinction.
Charming.
Yeah.
Not an alcoholic. Like.
Yeah, he's disciplined.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right. And organized.
Yeah.
And courteous.
Yes. But he's also incredibly, incredibly petty.
Yeah, really petty.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's so crazy how petty he is. It's like really.
He kills
really
his own goons.
Yeah.
Because of how petty he is about his revenge. It's his revenge at the end of the day. No one else can be a part of it.
Yeah.
This man, he says, worked for him for 20 years. He killed him just like that because he's willing to do that for Otesu.
Yeah. But for like half a sentence, Otesu said one time 30 years ago.
Yeah. Crazy.
And this is why Otesu couldn't figure out who the person was.
Yeah. Crazy.
That was mad at him. Yeah, it's really, really powerful stuff. But it is, it's also the motivation of like personal passion and love is really, really intense. I think he's a crazy character.
I think,
that's what I think it would lose. If you took out the actual incest from Otesu Lee Woo-jin and his sister, I think you would lose the love and the intimacy and like the spiritual connection that he had with his sister,
right.
which to him is maybe as an audience member we're disgusted by it. It's repugnant. It's incest,
right.
Whatever. But to him, it's the most important thing.
It was something.
Yeah.
And again. Goes back into the themes of perception. and perception being a big part of Korean culture.
Mm.
Lee Woo-jin didn't really seem to care how he was perceived.
Yeah, he had given up on that.
Yeah. Whereas his sister was a victim of that,
Yeah.
of a victim of that kind of culture, and it kind of broke him.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is kind of him,
Lashing out at society through his hyper obsession and destruction of a single individual.
Yeah, because that single individual executed the will of society.
Yeah.
They cast judgment.
Yeah. Or enabled the will of society.
Oh, yeah, enabled the will or enabled judgment to be cast.
Right, right, yeah.
He bore witness.
Yeah. But it's also interesting, too, though, that, like, Odesu is also someone who's not particularly interested or caring about what other people think about him.
Yeah. Or...
like, that's a part where they're maybe actually kind of similar. Because Odesu...
I think there's the same side, or two sides of the same coin.
Same coin, right.
Yeah. I don't think they're very dissimilar at all.
Yeah. I really, really like, and I think I said this earlier, but I really, really like the kind of like Beauty and the Beast vibes of Mido and Odesu, where he's like this like craven maniac. He's got insane hair.
His hair looks like an explosion.
Yeah, he literally looks like he's like the if something blew up in Looney Tunes, what your hair would look like afterwards. That's his hair for the whole movie, and he's just like constantly like bleeding and like stealing women's sunglasses and stealing people's cigarettes and just being like a fucking complete animal. And she's so cute and like spunky and interesting and like quirky and smart and like lovely, and it's like such a awesome like combo and pair. Like the movie's good.
The movie's so good. The movie's perfect. It is a perfect film.
Yeah, it's a perfect movie. Perfect movies do exist, and this is one.
I have a response for the YouTube comments.
Sure.
Actually, the only thing that they needed to do was go to therapy. That would have fixed everything, and then nothing bad would have happened, guys.
Yeah, exactly.
If Lee Woo-jin just went to therapy, if Odesu just went to therapy.
A lot of Monday morning quarterbacks in the YouTube comments for sure. What's the best part about it is these comments spring up because there are not video essays really about this movie. These arguments happen in the comments of like the OST, like videos for like the score.
That's so funny, actually.
That's like where these arguments are happening. That's like the meta for this movie. is like listening to different parts of the score and then going to the comment section to get in a fucking argument.
r/Oldboy is just comp music threads.
Yeah, the score is dope though. I mean, it's an incredible score. It's very moving. I will say that one thing about this movie also is that it was funny because I'm surrounded by clearly morons because I'm watching the movie in theaters and a bunch of people are like on their phones and stuff, and it's like, I know you've seen this like a bunch of times before.
Assholes, go home.
Well, here's the thing: I know you've seen this movie a bunch of times before. But
I hate people like that.
I know it's so annoying. But that being said, I at no point was reaching for my phone because this movie just has. This
movie's fucking awesome,
but it also moves at a really, really healthy clip. You know what I mean? Like because it is so smooth and subtle about where it gives you information and where it gives you satisfying, interesting payoffs, like action sequences. I mean, here's the other thing too. I mean, one of the greatest action sequences of all time, by the way.
Yeah, the long take in the hallway where it's shot like essentially like a side-scrolling beat 'em up.
Yeah.
Like Daredevil takes directly from it.
Yeah.
Like there's a million other. It's funny how the other adaptations try to recreate that and they just absolutely fail.
Well, the American one, they didn't even do a hallway.
No, they do this.
It's like a giant room. It's
corner,
like really
and
big.
then he turns a corner too, which breaks the whole like point of the.
I don't get it. We'll get to that stuff when we get to it. But that being said, that sequence is fucking amazing, and I love that he like the fact that I don't know. What's really interesting too is it has that weird vibe that the fight scene in Eastern Promises has, where there's like a level of exposure.
Have you played one of the Yakuza games?
I've played them in the past, yeah.
It's kind of like a Kiryu fight.
Yeah, it does. It feels like a fight from one of those games. It does feel like that. But the fact that he has a knife in his back for half of it.
Oh my god, he just gets stabbed in the back.
And then he just keeps going. Yeah.
And he's just swinging the hammer wild.
Yeah.
Eventually they knock him on the ground. He goes for the toes.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
It's so good. It's so good. But the way that the movie subtly integrates sequences like that with the information it needs to get you to its, conclusions. And how it moves so smoothly all together, so cohesively. It's just watchability is so incredibly high.
I don't understand how anyone could like whip their phone out while watching this movie. This movie's perfect.
I don't know. You never know. And when you're in Hollywood, you're potentially you're watching next to people who are maybe taking notes. You know what I mean?
But
because they're gonna write a review on the restoration, right? Who knows? Who knows what they're doing?
Sure. I'll give them the benefit.
You never know
of the
who the
doubt.
hell you're sitting next to when you're watching a movie in Hollywood.
But I don't know. Oldboy to me is like, it's a perfect film. It's kind of like I make the argument of Back to the Future. Robert Zemeckis' Back to the Future also being like a perfect film in terms of like just content per frame, per like screen time per second or whatever. There's not a single frame of wasted information. Everything is pertinent. Everything is important. Nothing is lost,
is a payoff, or is fun, right?
Like something that will become relevant somewhere down the line,
right? It's true.
Which just adds to the rewatchability. Because on the first watch, you're not gonna get all this. You're not gonna notice all this stuff.
Sure. I will say that like the first time I watched Oldboy, I was actually pretty confused at certain points. Whether it's the fact that it starts in media race, or whether I
have an interesting question for you then.
Sure.
How did you first watch Oldboy?
Okay, so here's the thing. Oldboy was really popular on MySpace.
I forgot. We're from two different generations of the internet.
So Oldboy was really popular on MySpace. So what was really common on MySpace was you would have like GIFs or like stills from movies that you liked on your MySpace. And a really popular image on MySpace was the picture of Lee Woo-jin laying next to them naked while he's clothed wearing the gas mask.
Oh my God. That's such... Okay, it's so funny that you say that was the one that gets shared around, because like I remember,
which by the way is because of the restoration that Neon has put out, that's a popular billboard around LA right now.
Okay, maybe I gotta go find that.
down Sunset towards Silver Lake, there's a giant billboard of that image from the film, and they're sitting there in bed naked together, and he is like rubbing his like hand across her body, completely clothed, wearing the gas mask.
So the one that I always saw like growing up, like on the internet, like whether it be Facebook or Instagram or stuff like that, was the one of old Jesus smiling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He's got he looks
like,
so cracked out,
like smiling in the hotel room, or smiling at the end of the movie, like that photo. The other one being of Lee Woo-jin in the elevator when he puts the gun to his head, but right before he pulls the trigger, essentially, where he's just kind of standing there and he's like crying almost to himself. He's like having this emotional cathartic breakdown or whatever. Like the pain is back, essentially.
He's like snapping.
Yeah. So that's how you're first exposed?
Well, yeah, I'd say it's really, it was funny what movies were kind of popular. What was that movie where the guy has like a samurai sword and he has a guitar and he's walking through the desert? That was another one that was really popular. That was really another popular movie on MySpace back in the day. But yeah, I think I just saw the still enough times that I just was like, oh, like it had a level of ubiquity in a shared memory, in a shared like cultural kind of zeitgeist vibe, that I felt like I needed to see it.
Like Linkin Park and Naruto AMVs.
Oh my God. Or our Offspring Akira AMVs. Or Power Man 5000 Dragon Ball Z AMVs.
Oh my God.
But yeah, those were the vibes on the internet at the time. And yeah, it was just like there were stills I would see on people's MySpaces, and I would be like, oh, well, that's just a movie I have to see now. Damn. And I that's a good question though. Did I rent it? Maybe we rented it. Maybe I got it from Blockbuster or something like that. Who knows? But or maybe, torrenting was really popular back then. So I did torrent a lot, but did I torrent Oldboy? I do not remember. But that is what led me to watch Oldboy. How did you watch Oldboy?
So trying to think whether or not there are two major instances where I remember like watching Oldboy like when I was really young. One of them was at school on my iPhone, and it was on a streaming service, and I just decided to watch it during lunch, and then I just decided to cut class for like the next two classes just to finish the movie. And but that was like a relatively poor, I think, watching experience, like on like on a little dinky iPhone 4.
Oh, you watched it on the iPhone 4? Good phone though. One of the iPhones, like,
But like
high
I
point.
feel like the like real experience that I had watching was like so. This is the reason why I say like I can't remember which one was the first time because this was both like in high school for me.
So you saw it in high school. I think I probably saw it in high
Yeah.
school too.
But the other experience was like I was with my uncle. We were going to Comic-Con that weekend, so I like stayed the night over at his place the night before because
Oh, in San Diego?
No, in like LA. We're
Oh,
gonna
LA Comic-Con. Okay.
drive San Diego Comic-Con, but we were gonna drive out at 5 a.m. So so I would go to his place the night before and stay there. We would wake up at 5 a.m. and then leave for San Diego because
Okay.
2 hours, 7 a.m.
Yeah, or that early, it's probably not even 2 hours, maybe like an hour and a half.
Yeah. But I remember him putting on Oldboy that night before we go to bed because like he had like this entire like kind of media room set up, and that was I think like the first like real like I absorbed everything going on, and I'm just maybe that's not something you should show like to like someone in like ninth grade. I don't think
I don't know. I think that's maybe how old I was when I saw it, though, too. It is definitely, it's the kind of movie, though, that's especially fun when you're that age because it's shocking.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's why it was really popular on 4chan because everything about 4chan was about shocking
the
humor.
Deeper themes or narratives of the film at the time. I don't think I just had the emotional or like, historical context to understand most of it.
Right.
But like, oh my God, just visually stimulating.
Right.
Thematically interesting.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a single moment where I was bored.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's the thing, too, is that, like, even just, like, the cheap thrills of the movie are, like, pretty fucking good.
Yeah.
Like, the corridor, like, hammer fight scene.
And that's not even, like, a big climactic action scene either. That happens, like, pretty early on in the film, relatively
But there's,
speaking.
like, but the movie keeps you going with, like, weird torture sequences and, like, weird fight scenes and, like, things
pseudo horror elements.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, home invasion type stuff.
Yeah. We'll just eat and there's like an invasiveness about it, because they're constantly being watched or listened to or observed in some capacity. So
not
like
just that, but like
the cheap thrills
they're being controlled this entire time.
Yeah.
This is like the whole. Have you seen that cow meme where it's like the cow stands in front of like the barrier and it's one way and the other way, but you see the end of the two roads and it just leads to the same location and it says the illusion of choice.
Yeah. Yeah, this is definitely a movie that explores the illusion of choice for sure.
Because like, what does it all matter? What decisions Old Tezu makes if Lee Woo-jin is just manipulates him into believing that his only options are revenge or the truth?
Yeah.
Because the third option that Old Tezu has is forgiveness. And that is never a road that he chooses to take.
Yeah. Or to just walk away.
Yeah. Which is forgiveness, essentially.
They talk about it too.
Yeah, no. Lee Woo-jin proposes it to him, saying that this is kind of an out you have. You can just walk away right now. This is all over. Forget about it. And we're done.
Yeah.
But he doesn't choose that.
Mm-mm.
That isn't like an option that registers for Old Tezu.
No.
Which I think is just more telling about who he is.
But also potentially the hypnosis too.
Yeah. I think a lot of the things can be written off
as part of the hypnosis. Yeah. But that's like what's the futility of the movie and what was so exciting about the futility in general. Anyway, I'm a little
I'm tapped out as well.
Tapped out too, yeah.
Is there any closing remarks?
No, but I hope that our comment section is at some point as spicy
as the Oldboy OST.
Yeah, exactly. As the Oldboy OST.
I guess my closing remarks are: go watch Oldboy if you haven't, and if you've lasted this long without watching Oldboy,
you're crazy.
We are essentially this video is probably as long as the movie at this point.
Yeah.
But if you're a fan of Oldboy, go check out another movie. It's another Korean movie called Memories of Murder. This is directed by the same director as Parasite, Bong Joon-ho. This is a historical mystery murder drama thing. I hope maybe we could talk about it one day because this is my personally favorite Bong Joon-ho movie.
Okay.
And it's based on a true story, or loosely inspired by true events. This is during the period in time in which Korea was going through a period of major industrialization. So there was a serial killer, and it was really difficult.
Is it a true story?
Yeah.
Based on true story, okay.
Yeah, based on true story. Based on true events or something like that. But there's a serial killer during this period of like a major industrialization, and the cops just do not have the means, method, manpower, anything to handle a serial killer, and they're just using this reconstruction phase as it's a method of taking advantage of that. But yeah, if you like Oldboy and you like Parasite, I guarantee you would like Memories of Murder.
Well, I would like to talk about that one in the future. I think it would be cool also to like eventually. I'm sure we'll talk about Zinda and the U.S. Oldboy, but also Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance and Lady Vengeance.
Oh, absolutely. Let's finish out the Vengeance trilogy.
Right. And then, you know, like the movies that this one is kind of similar to also.
Like I Saw the Devil.
Infernal Affairs has some like similarities, and we've already talked about each of the killers. So I don't know. We'll eventually, I think we'll be circling these topics.
But yeah, other than that, I guess that's it for us. Thank you again for watching. Bye.